Oh, we on? Yeah. Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Virginia City Council Chambers. This is a regularly scheduled committee of the whole meeting. We have a full agenda today. I'll call this meeting to order. Today's date is Tuesday, April 5th, 2022. The time is 9 a.m. This is a committee of the whole meeting, so we'll get right to it. We'll turn the agenda over to our city administrator, Britt C. Bennis. Britt?
Thank you. The first item on the agenda is appearance from Matt Reed, number 1, regarding the request for authorization to advertise for bids for the wastewater treatment plant phosphorus upgrade project.
Good morning, Matt. Matt Reed, our engineer of record from SCH. Good morning.
Morning. So I sent a memo around, or I handed a memo out to everybody. I'll go through that in just a second. It's part of the actual bid, so I wanna run through that with everybody. So hopefully I can say it so that everybody can understand it. But the main purpose of me being here today is to ask the council permission to advertise for bids for the wastewater treatment plant improvement projects. You guys might recall, we've been working on this for several months, and it's actually came down as a mandate a while back from the MPCA that's due to be done this summer. And so we have got the plans and specifications ready to go, and we're ready to advertise for bids, hoping to get bids back sometime in late April, early May, back in front of you guys for your review and hopefully award, and then they would start construction sometime this summer. Now, the memorandum that I passed out was mainly for information. It is part of your bid packet that Britt had sent around. So, but there was a slight change, so I wanted to try to explain that. So, as we've been working on this project, we've been working with a fabricator and a supplier to help design these troughs specific to the Virginia wastewater treatment plant's filter system. So they've been helping us out, and we've got it designed specifically for that. So the way the bid is set up is we are setting up what's called an allowance for the contractor to use, and it's been priced out already. This system that we've been working on, it's already been priced by the suppliers, so we kind of know what it's going to be. So we just tell the contractor here, when you bid this project, add this number into your bid, and everybody's gonna add the same thing. So everybody would add this $140,000 to their bids. It would have been part of it anyway. It's not extra. It would be no different than if the contractor was going out to the suppliers saying, hey, I need you guys to provide this equipment, and what would that cost me? We're just telling them up front, this is what it's gonna cost. So it's not anything extra. It's all inclusive. But what we found out here just recently was, due to the volatility of the stainless steel prices, and I'm seeing that on several projects, quite frankly, with water main fittings and all kinds of things. So these suppliers aren't willing to guarantee their price for an extended period of time. They're going on like a 20-30 day time frame. So you'll get it, they'll say, yeah, this would be good for 30 days, and then we're gonna review it again. What we're being told is that with the stainless steel, that they're looking at about 3% per month increase. And so then they don't know that for sure. That's the problem. It's just, this stuff is all up in the air. They just don't know right now. They're taking their best guess and trying to keep us apprised as best they can. So we've got the price as of March 29th. The bids won't open until later in April, first part of May, which will be past the timeline that they're willing to guarantee us that price. So what we're suggesting is that we add a little more into the allowance right now for the contractors to put in. We're saying let's use $150,000 instead of $140,000. And then if it turns out that for some reason it didn't go up, we can change order out that extra 10, 5, 4, 3, whatever the number is that they don't need in their allowance, we can change order it back out of the project. So it's the other way we could do it is we could leave it at 140, and if it turns out that it's higher, we could come back and say we need to change order it in, right? So I mean, it's semantics, but we felt that the best way to do it would be to account for it right away, try to account for it as best we can right away, and then back it out if we need to. So the reason I'm bringing that up, and I wanted to explain that, is because in the bidding documents that Britt had sent to you guys, the allowance had called out 140,000. So we're suggesting to use 150. So when you authorize us, hopefully if you authorize us to advertise for bids, we're looking to have it at 150,000 instead of 140. So I just wanted to be transparent on that. I don't want to worry anybody about why that number doesn't match. So I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody at all, but there is some method to our madness here in what we're trying to do. So I can answer any questions you have, or if you have none, then we can talk about moving ahead.
I have 3 questions, and we'll go to Councillor Johnson, maybe Councillor Paulson, and whoever else has their light on. So, first of all, what's the total cost of the project?
Total project cost estimated right now is $600,000.
Okay, and where is that money coming from? Sherry?
Mayor, Councilor. Matt, I have a question. Now, when you say 600,000, that's with the 150 everything, right? Because back in July, actually June 10th, I got a total estimate from Bill Hennis, and so it's already budgeted.
But how much is budgeted?
Right now, we have $507,500.
$507,000?
$500,000.
So this would be another $100,000 approximately.
Yeah, and I can address that, Mayor. When the estimate was put together, like Sherry said, was that this last June or the June before even now? Was it 21 or 22? Or, I mean, 20 or 21?
21.
21, okay. So that estimate was put together based on bid prices at that time, and of course, you guys have all seen what's happened. So hopefully we're estimating high enough to capture some of these changes, so.
Well, I was asking the incremental question because the total project cost is $600,000, and we know that it's only $507,000 is budgeted for. I was just asking where the additional $93,000, give or take, is going to be coming from, Sherry.
Correct me if I'm wrong here, Britt. Can we use some of that rescue money?
No.
Okay.
It comes from the sewer fund. The sewer fund is healthy enough to absorb that amount. We certainly hope the bids will come in lower than that, but that's the estimate at this time.
That was the answer I was looking for. Thank you very much, Britt, Sherry. And then, so, did we ever have these troughs before?
Yeah, they're just made out of a different material.
Okay, and so the lifespan of the troughs are going to be longer when we're using this material as they were when we did the original construct of the wastewater treatment plant. Is that correct?
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Theoretically, that's going to be the case.
Theoretically, that's yep, correct.
Thank you very much, Matt. Councillor Johnson is on first, and then we'll go around the room. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt, for coming in and explaining this. It really helps to know what we might be in for. And I'm guessing the reality of this is that it could be more than that even, just depending on. And kind of to piggyback off what the mayor said, what should the lifespan of this be? Like how many years before we need to be looking at this again?
I wish I had a good answer for you on that. I'd have to ask the designers on it, but if I had to take a guess, I would think 20 to 30 years minimum.
And how long have the current ones have been in there about that?
10.
But basically we're upgrading them to a better construction.
Correct.
Okay.
Do you know, Paul, do you have any idea on the lifespan of those newer ones? Okay. I would say it's 20 to 30 years though.
And knowing, after getting the tour, knowing how special our wastewater treatment plant is because of its design and the way people services, that's what you still are, right? People, they work with us. And this is one of those things that if we owned the wastewater, or if we did all of our in-house wastewater treatment, this would all have to be outsourced anyway. So that they're there and they know what we need has really been a benefit to us. So I appreciate the work you've put into this, and unfortunately it's just one of those things that happen.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Before we go to Councillor Paulson, are these troughs, or does this system, don't they require some type of an annual inspection to determine the wear and tear and how this moves forward? Is that something that's done on a maintenance scheduled basis?
I would imagine that's an ongoing, come up here, Paul. Paul can answer that for you.
Paul, would you? Because I'm surprised that, of the shortness of the lifespan of the original equipment that's been put in there now we're trying to replace. So can you explain to me what kind of maintenance is done on these on a regular basis in the past and what the regular maintenance are? Is it the same in the future, or is there a different method in which to do so? And then are there reports available that you give to the city staff with respect to the progress about the wastewater treatment plant and where the what we call scheduled maintenance over time is communicated to our staff? Paul?
Yeah, so the troughs are just for the filters. They're used for a backwash, basically. The ones that are installed now are fiberglass, and the new ones will be stainless. I've been around wastewater plants, other ones, and the troughs were never an issue. They're just there. As far as maintenance, you're going to notice if there's any sags in the troughs or stuff like that. So the current ones we did maintenance on once a month. And so the stainless one we shouldn't have to do anything with. They're just in place, and the supports hold them in place. And we have them at the water plant. They've been there for 20 years. Nobody's ever done anything to them, So we look at them weekly or, to see if there's any issues with them, but I don't anticipate any as the operator.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Moe. Councilor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. Some of my questions were already answered, but this is in regarding the troughs specifically. So the current ones are fiberglass. Were we mandated to upgrade to the stainless steel? Is that why that we're going to a fabricator to get this?
I don't think you're necessarily mandated, but like Paul said, they're a much better trough and they're going to last a lot longer. And they're more, part of the problem with the fiberglass ones, my understanding is structurally they're having some issues with them. So these will be more structurally sound and to the mayor's question, last longer.
Last longer. Mm-hmm. And the current condition of the ones that the troughs that we currently have, they're unusable?
We've been working on them since I've been here 6 years, and we've done many upgrades to them, supports, and they just keep cracking. And we've ourselves put in stainless beams to stop the catastrophic crack.
So they're beyond use right now.
They're limping by right now.
Thank you. Okay. Then I have a question regarding the sewer fund and what is the available balance in that sewer fund, and how do we go forward with plans about how much we're going to use out of that sewer fund annually in our budget?
Mayor?
Sherry?
Mayor and Council? Yes, I have, with the conservative, I just sent you an email, actually. With the conservative budget for 2022, we will end with a $756,000 in the black. So I think we can be safe to say $150,000, since I already budgeted $500,000 for the project, which I believe, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, that included about $140,000 of what we're talking about.
Right.
So we're talking maybe an extra $10,000 that wasn't quite budgeted.
Matt?
No, the total project cost right now is estimated to be $600,000. That 600 includes the 150, actually. It includes that.
So we should be sufficient to handle that.
Okay, and then just to go back to how much is in that sewer fund, because that's a dedicated fund, right? That we can utilize for these types of things that come forward, whether it's maintenance or mandates. So do we have a total of what's in that fund, and then do we budget annually for those possible or potential maintenance or mandate issues?
Well, in this case, we did budget because we got the information up front last June. So it's nice to get these things ahead of time to budget. But yes, the sewer fund has always sat pretty good. I can get you the exact monthly report here.
Okay.
But my little phone.
We should be okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the last question that I had Did I write it down? Sorry, I guess I didn't write it down. If it'll come back to me, I'll come back around to it. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Paulson. Councillor Bearable?
Yeah, thank you very much. The sewer fund is an enterprise fund, and it's charged every month on your utility bill under sewer. And part of that money goes into this enterprise fund every month from every person and every business in Virginia. So it stays pretty healthy. As you remember, we just raised that fund when in this year, Sherry, January, did it go up again a little bit, the sewer fund for the households and businesses, or was it last year? I don't remember.
It was last year, Charlie. I'll look on that resolution when I go.
Yeah, I know it's gone up because I see it on my bill. And it's tied to your water usage, so. Paul, how often are we gonna have to replace those filters and how expensive are they?
Replace the filters, you say?
Yeah, stainless steel tanks. You're gonna have to replace them because isn't that gonna sift out the phosphorus? Those filters?
That helps with that. Actually, the filters, I mean, it's going to help with our phosphorus that's coming up, but, we're put in for the mercury limit.
Oh, okay.
And we did do an inspection on the filter media before this project, had it sent in, and we are going to add some filter media to it, but the media that's in there is in good shape.
Okay, that's all the questions I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bearable. Any other questions, comments from the council? Councillor Johnson?
I would move that we authorize to advertise for bids at the recommended, with the new recommendation from Matt Reed.
Okay, Councillor Johnson moves to approve, to authorize the advertisements for bids for this project. Is there support?
I'll support, Mayor.
Support by Councillor Bearable. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Paul.
Second item on the agenda is Matt's also. It's the estimate to repair 3rd Street North Water Main Loop from Stifel Nicholas. This was a request we had from Public Utilities. We know that Stifel Nicholas is in the Old Natural Harvest Building. She's had frozen water lines this year numerous times. It froze a couple of times. And so the utilities identified that to assist her from ever having a frozen water line again, they'd like to loop it. And it's just good practice to loop these water lines because dead-end water lines cause stagnant water. And it's just not a good idea because that just causes issues. So they want to loop it. They got Matt SEH to do a quote, an estimate of what they think it's going to cost. So at this time, the Public Utilities is asking if the city would be able to participate with any of the costs of this repair. This was not budgeted for the utilities. It's not budgeted for the city, but they're wondering if any way we can help out.
I have one question, please, and then we'll go to Councillor Freely. Well, prior to that entity moving in there, this is the old Natural Harvest food store, right? And so do we have any track record on any problems prior to the new owner moving in?
No, but you have to remember it was a store. So it had a lot more people going through it all the time and literally a lot more flushing toilets, a lot more water running through it because of the food preparation and people continually being in there. Now it's a 5-person office building that just doesn't have the water flow like it used to. And I mentioned, dead-end water lines are really not something you'd like anyway because that always causes potential for freezing.
Yes, and I understand that, and I anticipate that was the case. I just wanted that clarified for the general public as we move forward with discussing whether or not this is something that we're going to continue to do or participate in and where that money is coming from. So this will trigger some spirited discussion on this particular subject. So Matt, you hang loose for a little bit. Councillor Freely, did you have your light on? An inadvertent light? Okay, Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I've talked to the owner of the building several times, and we just went through the process together of how they just had to unfreeze her lines. She had to hire a, I think, a contractor to actually bring a current from a pole across 3rd in an alley and then thaw the line out. So what the Public Utilities had told her, I think it was the Public Utility. Is there anyone here from the Public Utilities today? No, okay. I believe what they had told her is that, she's she has that allowance. They will give her the allowance to run water, to keep water running, to keep the line thawed out, or keep the water moving. But she has put in a lift station, and without a backup generator, it wasn't recommended that she was able to do that. So at some point, somebody recommended she could just take a hose and run it, out a window or whatever, and let that water go. But really, she cannot do that because that would run right into the lake, and that would be a nightmare. So I think we've come to this, I would say they're trying to come up with a solution, and I'm not sure how, why the request that the city would have to pitch in on this, when some of my conversations were that some of those water lines dead end, and I don't know, Matt, if you know where those dead end locations are, but this is really similar to what we dealt with the Hometown Focus building, where they were having some of those water issues and who owns the lines and that sort of thing. So I do believe that there are enough dead-end lines to justify that this problem, we need to address it and take care of it so that there are no other issues going forward. But at this point, I'm not sure what who would be responsible financially for this, so I'd like to have more conversation on that. But, I think the owner has tried everything that she can think of to remedy this. She's put in the lift station. She's had to hire people to kind of, unthaw the lines, and it's happening. It's across the road. So if she were to have to dig herself, that road will have to be, I think it's 3rd Street North, that you'd have to take a section out of there. So I don't see a plan in here about what actually needs to be done, other than maybe Matt, what you had included here, the list, and it's $196,000. And I believe, did you submit that to the VPU?
Matt?
Yeah, so maybe I can try to help you clarify that for you. So, Public Utilities reached out to us because they had an idea that they've got 2 dead-end lines in the alleys. They've actually repaired a few of similar situations the last couple of years. They've done a couple projects to loop some lines to alleviate freezing problems with the mains themselves and to get rid of what Britt referenced earlier with the stagnant water that gets caught up on the end of those lines. So what they were looking at in this situation, her service line goes from her building all the way across 3rd Street, down the alley, and ties into a dead-end line. That in and of itself isn't necessarily a problem, except for the fact that their suspicion is that service line isn't deep enough, and so it's freezing. So to try to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, Public Utilities was thinking they could loop that water lane, which would improve the mains situation, and if they move the loop across the road closer to Stiefel Nicholas's building, it would alleviate the majority of their cost to fix their service line, because they wouldn't have to dig across the road, and they could do it right. They could fix that service right. And so I think the idea was to try to help them out at the same time solve a problem that.
And I think this is a great solution to, hopefully mitigate potential things that'll come forward in the following years. My question is, was there a proposal that was being put forward from VPU to the City of Virginia in terms of how to split this, or what they're asking for in terms of cost, or?
That I don't know.
Okay.
Britt might know more about that.
So it would be helpful maybe to have someone represented from VPU try to help us kind of walk through if there's in-kind services that either party could do. And this hasn't gone out for bids. This is just an estimation from SEH.
Correct. It's just an engineer's estimate. Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I have 2 questions before we go, Councilor Bearable, and then we'll back over to Councilor Johnson. So does this present an additional issue with respect to I know that before, I think there was a couple of contractors over the course of the years before the new tenant took over, where there was some freezing rod lines on there, and 2 times they came in and unthawed the line for that purpose. But as we're looking at that and looking for participation in changing that loop system, I would ask how that affects the potential issues we have that's along 6th Avenue. Because as you come around from the Lakeshore Motel, you're coming around 6th Avenue, that road seems to be collapsing once again. So if that road is collapsing, is the issue that we're talking about today a contributing factor to that, or is that collapse a contributing factor to the issue we have here, or are they two separate issues? Could you kind of give us an idea about that, Matt?
I don't know for sure, but I think these would be two separate issues. I think the stuff going on 6th Avenue might be related to sanitary or storm sewer. I'm not 100, meaning that there's a trench there that is just settling on, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, we fixed it once, and now it's gravitating toward the issue that we had before. So thank you for that clarification, Councillor Baraboo, and then over to Councillor Johnson.
Matt, if they do this looping system, is Stifel going to be responsible for their line from the city portion into their building? Because that's evidently too shallow, too. Are they going to be responsible for that cost? You know, offhand? Because I know the utilities has talked about this, but they haven't gone out for bids or anything on this project. And I imagine they're going to do a lot of this in-house, too, because they just did a bunch of stuff on, was it Rogerville Road? They just looped a bunch of lines down there last summer.
Yeah, they hired a contractor to do that, and they would hire a contractor to do this as well. But to answer your question, from the water main, my understanding is from the water main to the business would be the responsibility of the business owner.
Okay.
And in this situation, that's where if they were to move that line closer to the business, it would shorten the amount of service line that they have to replace, plus they would be able to avoid replacing the road. So, yes.
Plus it would prevent freezing the closer it is too, because if you have that long part across there and they don't use much water there.
Right.
Looping would be better if you do it closer to their building. So, okay. That's all I needed answered. Thank you.
And then one more question, and then go to Councillor Johnson. Is this a project that would likely have to be started in the spring here after the thaw, and then have it corrected by winter next year, or what would be the timeline for this?
Yeah, I think sometime this summer. It won't take very long for somebody to do. They already have a contract, or they're in the process of bidding out a project a couple blocks to the south to replace some water main, and the big street and infrastructure project is over on 3rd Avenue, so there's contractors in the area. So it would be done sometime this summer.
Okay, thank you. I wouldn't want it to come out of the Public Works budget. They're tight enough as it is, but as we move forward and to make the discussion, try to figure out what we can do as a partnership. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I want to piggyback on what Councillor Paulson was saying about in-kind services. There is a lot of work on here that maybe the city could do in-kind as opposed to writing a check to the public utilities. I guess I would agree that to have Public Works and Ryan and whoever, Matt and Britt get together and see what can be done, how much of this is public utilities able to do in-house to lower those costs, how much we can do so that whatever we are doing brings the cost down, and it benefits hopefully more than, it sounds like it would benefit more than one business. I know there's not a lot over there, but because on the other hand, we are going back to the previous discussion, any water that they're not using means that we're not collecting sewer rates on that. So when they're frozen for a month, and it is costly. We, once upon a time, had to have the big generator hooked up to our pipes at Apple Tree, and it took almost 48 hours to get a trickle. So I would be supportive of sending this back to the group of you to figure out how to reduce the costs by in-kind services, and then come back with a dollar amount that the city would be responsible for.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Johnson. Just as a side note, allowing them to trickle their water and give them a rebate as a temporary fix to help them continue to have that water flow in there without it freezing once again. Same thing happens in Midway, and many of the residents there, including myself, where we trickle the water because the water lines are so shallow that they continue to trickle, so many of the homeowners get a rebate for that, and that has been going on for years, and that has not been addressed or resolved in any way, shape, or form. This is just one example of an issue that we have to address. The only difference between the Midway issue and this issue is that there are dead-end water lines that are maybe adversely affecting that. By changing the loop would eradicate and alleviate the issues that. So, thank you, Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one more point to this. And I believe the business owner, there was indications that there would be no cost to the business owner. And I don't know if that is going to ring true. So they're going to, what the proposed fix or correction would be, is to bring the water main to the other side, to the north side of 3rd Street, closer to her. And if there are any costs that would be associated, is there any potential partnership we could do with the business owner so that she is not having to incur any costs? Are there grants or anything that we could work on for her?
Absolutely.
Because there was some email correspondence that I was kind of brought into, and there was some indicators that there would be no charge because of the problems that she's been having. So I'm concerned now that we're having this conversation and she's going to hear, okay, now you're going to be responsible for this, when there were some email exchanges indicating that she would not be responsible. So if there is some level of responsibility, if we could, in that discussion that Councillor Johnson is proposing, if we could include any of that, those options, financial mitigation options for her. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paulson. Councillor Bearable.
Yeah, we don't want to get into, as a council, into that private property issues, because once we do this, then we're going to be obligated to anybody that may have trouble with freezing lines and stuff across the city. We haven't helped anybody else with those in the past. It's all been their cost if it's on their property or on their lines and stuff. But Matt, I got another question. If they're going to trickle their water, they go into a lift station and electricity goes out and it freezes, because it could freeze then or it could overflow their lift station. We still haven't solved the problem. If that happens, they need to have a direct feed into the sewer somehow for the water trickle, like they do in Midway. Most of those people trickle it, so they could leave a water faucet on in their building, but if it overflows the lift station, then you got another whole issue. So that's got to be addressed too, to the owner of that property. So, I don't want to see us getting into a catch-22 where all of a sudden we do it for one business on their property and then we start looking at another one. If it's a brand new line, that's a whole different story going into their property, but they're always been responsible for the cost from their property line out to the city's line.
Thank you. This is something that's brought forth for us to take a look. There's been a request by the public utilities for us to participate in. It appears as though we have to take some action with respect to this and can't let this go. The anticipated start is sometime in the early summer, and it wouldn't take long to fix it, so we could alleviate the issue that she's having there. I think it would be beneficial for us to allow staff to move with our city staff and our SCH and meet with the Department of Public Utilities and include the conversation with the business owner that's affected and come up with a plan moving forward at a partnership and bring that back to the council for review and action. So that's kind of where I think we're at right now. But let's see what was Councillor Johnson? Did you have your light on there for? No. Okay. So thank you. Okay. So anything else before the council? I think, yes, Councillor Freely.
An anecdotal, we have a property up on 9th Street and Rogers Road that had the loop done to it recently. And when I went out to talk to the contractor following the completion of that and said, it'll be nice, we don't have to trickle our water anymore, he said, not so fast. The truth is, the service line wasn't deep enough below the frost, and we would have had to dig all the way to the avenue to be able to correct that. So we have looped it, but the problem is the line not deep enough. So even though they corrected it, they haven't corrected it. So that's frustrating for us as well. And so you're still dripping or having water up in Midway? You have to keep that
I am,
running?
and many of the neighbors on the other side, in the older homes that were built in the late 50s, early 50s, late 50s, continue to trickle the water. And I don't know what the number is yet, and I suppose that information could come from the public utilities. But there are some residents have been trickling the water for years. I certainly have been.
And is that an additional sewer cost then, with the water going down the sewer, or no?
Well, I think
On the water
you could go and apply for relief. You're trickling your water with the utility so they know, and they make that adjustment. I have not done so, but others have. Councilor Bearable, could you give a little more insight for that?
My daughter's in that same area where her water can freeze, so she trickles all winter. What they do, they take her average water use and they subtract the other trickle part from that, so she just gets her average water use that she uses as a charge, which is a normal process, and then anything excess, utilities writes off. So that's how they work it there. So she uses 5 units of water on an average throughout the year. That's what she gets charged for. She doesn't get charged for the excess that she trickles.
I guess, case in point, it isn't necessarily the looping that corrects the problem if the service line is not deep enough.
I think, Matt, maybe could you clarify for Councilor Freely, please?
Yeah, that is an important distinction to understand. So the looping on the Rogerville Road project was primarily done in order that, one, to keep the flow going, but that was more of a water main, not a water service remediation. So by looping that main, it will hopefully keep the main from freezing. The service lines that are still shallow, that isn't necessarily going to fix that problem. And that applies directly to this situation here, that looping that water main over by Stiefel Nicholas will alleviate the main freezing. But if the service line is still shallow outside of past the main, that could still happen. So that goes to the point of having to make repairs and maybe put the water service deeper. In the situation of Stiefel Nicholas, it would also get their service line out from under the road, which helps significantly. But that is a very important distinction to make, that just because the main is looped doesn't mean the services won't still freeze if they're still put in shallow. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Councilor Freely. Something else?
Well, is that service line then the responsibility of the resident, or it is?
Typically it is.
Okay. But the confusion was why they would have had to dig to the avenue as opposed to the service line to the home. There was no distinction there.
In which situation?
My understanding was the main wasn't deep enough.
In which situation?
The one up
the Rogerville Roads?
On Rogerville Road.
It wasn't. The main was dead-ended, and it wasn't deep enough, so they were having problems with the mains freezing. So when they put the loop in, they put the loop section in deep enough, but it keeps the water moving, so then it helps prevent the mains from freezing. Make sense?
Yep.
So in this particular case, before we go back to Councilor Johnson, is the water line to the business, not the main, the service line, is that too shallow?
I don't know for sure, but my suspicion is it's probably too shallow, and being the fact that it's underneath the road besides, the frost drives deeper under the road, so that doesn't help the situation.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Councilor Johnson.
I will move to direct staff to work with public utilities to come back with a concrete plan and what the participation of the city would be.
And costs associated with that as well?
Sure.
Thank you. Did you get that motion by Councilor Johnson, Pam? Moved by Councilor Johnson. Is there support?
All support for further discussion.
Support by Councilor Bearable for further discussion. Further discussion. Councilor Bearable.
Yeah, I take a look at this. There's only one real solution to this problem. Because that lift station she's got in there, if they don't do something on their property to bury stuff deeper and do stuff, she's only got one choice: put in a automatic start generator. That's what I just did at my house in Lindsay Edition, because my water table is way too high, and if I'm gone, my sump, and we lose electricity, my sump doesn't work. And I can flood my whole finished basement if that sump quits. So I put in a automatic start generator like City Hall has here. That's the only, unless they dig it all up, I don't see any other solution. Because my drain tile is in the water table where I live. So I can't do anything with new drain tile. So that's my solution to my issue if it ever floods.
Thank you, Councilor Baraboo. The motion on the floor is to direct staff to, would you read back the motion, please, and then we'll take a vote.
Meet with the Virginia Public Utilities to determine a decision and present to the council for review on the Stifel Nicholas.
Okay, and that's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Barnzelli.
Last spring, a year ago, or maybe 2 years ago, didn't we discuss doing something with that road? Because it was so shallow?
It was the 6th Avenue project where it was collapsing. We did something with that, and we took emergency action to try to fix 6th Avenue as it was sinking as a result of whatever that was.
Ridgewood? Never did anything in the Ridgewood area.
No.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Matt, for everything.
The next item on the agenda is Paul Moe, wastewater treatment plant. He's got a couple items, and there is an additional item on your desk. The first item is approve the resolution for ferric chloride in the amount of $874 a dry ton.
Okay, welcome once again, Mr. Moe. And can you explain to us this, is this something that's new? Is it a new charge that we have, or is it an expansion of the charge? Or is it something we've been doing for a long time, or is it a new regulatory requirement that's an unfunded mandate? Please continue. Thank you.
Good morning. Yeah, this is just the ferric chloride that we use for phosphorus removal right now. It's an annual quote that we get for you. This will be replaced by the RE300 at the end of the year. So this should be the last year that we have to get quotes for ferric.
And if you remember, what was the quote last year?
It was $710 a dry ton last year.
And so it's a little higher?
Correct. It's $874 this year was the cheapest, and $950 for the second one.
So if you don't have the information on the top of your head, can you give us an estimate based upon the usage for this calendar year of 2022, how much more that's going to cost us in operating costs?
I'm not real good at math, but especially when dry tons to gallons. But from what I came up with, we're paying about $28,000 right now, and it'll be $34,000.
Thank you very much, Paul. I appreciate it. Okay, looking for any questions, comments, or concerns from the council? Or action to be taken by the council? So we need approval for that. Looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion for approval for the.
Thank you. Councilor Freely makes a motion to approve the quote for the wastewater treatment plant. Is there support?
I'll support, Mayor.
Well, well, we got 3 supports. So support by Councilor. Okay, support by Councilor Baraboo. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Paul.
The next item is from Paul also. It's approve the purchase of a gearbox and required removal and installation.
Paul, once again.
Okay. All right. So I believe it was in November, we had an issue. We have fine screens out there. We have 4 of them. They remove the rags and such from the stream. One of the gearboxes started making a noise. I've called in 3 contractors to give us a bid. We can't for sure tell if it's the gearbox, but the sound comes by the gearbox. Nobody will say definitively where the noise is coming from. The unit has to be pulled and the gearbox be taken off. So all 3 of so one of the persons gave us a quote, that's the G&E, to pull that. The other 3 all declined because they don't know how the gearbox comes off there, and the manufacturer won't give us that information. So this G&E is the rep for the manufacturer. They're not the manufacturer. So they give us a quote to pull the fine screen. Well, we have had issues lately with the fine screen run times. There's brushes on them. We probably don't recall, but we had one of them fixed a while back. The brush is replaced. So the run times are getting excessive on these. So we also decided that we'd get a bid to pull the other two also while they're here, so they don't have to pay twice to move up here. So the first bid that was in the agenda is for $18,000. That's to pull it and to replace the gearbox. That is not the cost of the gearbox. So also on the agenda, should be a cost of the gearbox, which was $8,000. They want a gearbox on site, so when they pull that, they just put the new gearbox in. And then we can send that gearbox in, get it repaired, and then we'll have a spare.
Okay.
And then the quote that was submitted to you this morning, I don't have it offhand, I gave her the copy. But I think it's about $30,000. And that was to pull the other two, change the gearbox out, and to change these brushes. On the bottom of these screens, there's brushes that clean the screen, and they're getting wore out now. So that's why we're having the excessive runtime. Sorry. Yeah, so it's for 29. So that needs to be done. We're going to put it on next year's budget, but since they're already going to be here, we decided to put a quote there too to see what everybody thought about that.
Okay, thank you. I have a number of questions. The first is there a regular maintenance record of inspections of these gearboxes and brushes? Do they do a monthly, weekly inspection to look at the wear and tear before it gets to the point where these brushes might be a contributing factor to the failure of the gearbox?
Well, the design of these fine screens isn't normal. Normally they put them in so you can pull them up more vertical. These are installed horizontally, so they have to be, and it's not safe to get in this wet well. So they have to be pulled with a crane to do the maintenance on them. So we do change oil on the gearbox. We do monthly go down and hose off these screens the best we can. There's access gates, but we do not enter into this space. It's just, there's too much flow coming in. It's too dangerous.
Okay, my second question is, what is the total cost? $18,000 here, $29,000 there. So what is the total cost you're looking at? And once I get that figure, I'm going to share where that money's coming from.
Well, okay, so if we were just to pull the one unit that needs the gearbox replaced, it was $18,000 to pull that and to replace the brushes and to put the new gearbox on. The gearbox was around $8,000. I don't have that one with me. It's right around $8,000. And then the crane operator, we use a local crane operator, Northern Crane, and they are $200 an hour. So it could take 1 day, could take 3 days to pay. We don't know how long that'll take to.
At a maximum of 8 hours per day?
Correct. At the max, that with the $18,000 quote would take 3 days for the crane at $200 an hour, 8 hours a day. Correct. The other one was the $30,000 quote is to pull all three of them. They said it could take up to 5 days for the crane to be on site, and then the $8,000 for the gearbox. But then we'd have all these up to date, the fine screens, all the brushes replaced. But they probably have to be done again. They should be done. It says in the book every year, but from experience, probably every 5 years, them should be pulled and the brushes replaced. Part of the issue with the cost is when they put these in, these are meant to be taken out, just pulled with a crane. Well, they left all these pins in down below to pull these. So somebody has to get down below and pull these pins, and they then set it up so the brackets are to pull it out. They put them in permanently, so all of them have to be torched off and refabricated. So that's all in this cost too. That's what we had to do the first one. So that's part of why it's so expensive right now. Next time, all we should have to do is pull a crane up and pull them things. We're gonna take videos of it so we can have a local contractor next time replace this gearbox if need be.
So if you're looking at the minimum expenditure is the $30,000 to pull them all, replace the one, inspect the others, and send that back. But that's included, the repair of the first one is not included in the bid moving forward, so that's an additional cost. But if you're looking at 24 hours times $200 versus 3 days, that's $4,800 in addition to that. So you're looking at a potential cost of about $34,800 plus the cost of the repair of the other one. Is that correct?
The $34,000 plus the cost of the gearbox, and that would be to pull all three. Otherwise, it's $18,000 plus the gearbox. That $30,000 would actually probably have another 2 days of crane operator. He said 5 days, so.
So that's $2,400 more.
Correct.
So it's about $7,200 right in that area, in addition to the $30,000, correct? So we're looking at, $38,000 approximately. Okay, so, I mean, I know the councilor's gonna want a breakdown of all those costs before we approve this piecemeal. But before we go to Councilor Johnson, Sherry, where would that money come from?
Mayor, council, if you wish to do the whole package, excuse me, I budgeted $50,000 in repair and maintenance on general equipment for this year, and I also have $18,000 budgeted in miscellaneous. So between the two account line items, you would be sufficient.
But that sufficiency would be, all that money would be, budget money would be eaten up by this one project. Is there any additional costs associated with the new issues with the wastewater treatment plant that we'll have to deal with it then without it being budgeted? Is that correct?
At this time, that's what you would have to go forth on.
Okay, so we still have a gap between $72,000 and $65,000, which is budgeted. So we have another $7,000 still sitting out there that we would have to find the money for, in addition to the concerns about any other associated costs that's not budgeted for, or our budget is used up for any other issues with respect to the wastewater treatment plant. Is that correct?
No, it's not.
Okay, what is correct?
$50,000 budgeted. Plus another $18,000 is $68,000.
So $68,000.
Minus your expenses, I came up with, if you were going to do 2 more days, I didn't add that in. I had a balance of $7,200. Now, if you're going to add 2 more days in there for the crane operator, you got to minus that off there. You would still be in the black. But once again, that's minor repair, maintenance on the building. So I don't know how well the building's holding up in other areas.
Well, then I would ask I don't know what was budgeted last year for building maintenance repairs and how much was spent on that. That could give us a baseline figure as to what that is. Paul, do you know off the top of the head what part of that budget was utilized for building and maintenance?
No, I do not.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Paul. You hang on here for a minute. Thank you, Sherry. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I would ask if we could get the breakdown of what needs to be done, and then the other ones be like an ad alternate like we do with other engineering stuff, and it be put on for the discussion items for next Tuesday evening's meetings so that we can know that, and then it'll give the staff a little bit of time to make sure that we're paying for it, because I like the idea that we're being preventative here, and then knowing when the next time, sounds like the way you're planning this is we will be able to pull it out next time without having to do extra work and do some of that regular stuff. And again, when I was there for the tour, and I'd encourage any of you to go, the way the plant was designed in itself is a problem for regular maintenance and for the things were added on instead of redesigning, and I'm sure that was done as cost savings in the process. And most of that was done before you all got there. So that's part of the challenge, is that we have a group of professionals that do this nationwide, working on a very specialized plant that they are still learning, that the city created over unfunded mandate after unfunded mandate, is my understanding. So I appreciate the time you're putting into this, and if we can just get a clear breakdown, I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, if there's any other discussions, I'm looking for a motion. I'll go Councilor Bearable.
I can make the motion that we move forward with this, but maybe before I do this, I think it is foolish to not do all three of these at one time. Okay, if you call them back a second time, 18 times 3 is $54,000 already without the replacement stuff in there. And so if you need to call them back the next year, the costs are probably going to be up with all this cost stuff going up all over the country right now. I say we do all three, and if they need replacement at this time, we should do it. It's about $78,000 plus to do all three of them at once. Yet, because that doesn't include the, does that 18,000 or that 30,000 include some of the parts and stuff or not?
That $30,000 actually would probably end up being about $42,000 with the gearbox and the crane. That does include the parts.
Okay, then that makes a difference.
$42,000.
Makes a difference in my calculations then. So I think we should do all three, so I'm going to make a motion that we do all three and go with the $30,000 bid process.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor. Is there support? Is there support? Is there support? Motion fails without support. I think we're looking at staff bringing back that information before you go to that motion. I think that's the goal and objective here. But we have our Public Works Director here. Did you want to make any comments at all, Jim? I think it would, your input or knowledge and expertise based on your training experience may help us, you know, as we gravitate through this issue.
Yeah. Yes. Good morning. Yeah, I've been spending some time with Paul Doan at the wastewater treatment plant. We don't have a real structural maintenance policy down there, and I'm a firm believer in that. We need one. These pumps are long overdue. Like I say, they should come out annually. The way they were designed and put in, we're not allowed that access. They've got to come out one at a time with an overhead mobile crane. The other ones you see will come out where you can lift them up 3 feet out of the pit and you can work down in that pit on them. We don't have that option or that design. We would have to isolate that pit to quarter off each area of that, which we don't have that availability. I'm with Charlie on this. I believe we're going to save money in the long run. We should have a spare gearbox there. So if we do have issues, we're up and running again. We can pull it ourselves. But I am a believer that this is something we're going to, if we don't take care of it now, it's going to become an issue down the line. And I'd like to see some preventative maintenance.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Counselor, want to continue with your deal, Counselor, and then we'll go with Counselor.
I don't have a problem if it goes back to staff, if we act on it this next Tuesday night on it, once they bring back the total cost. And I think, Jim, you're okay with that too. We can act next Tuesday.
Yes.
But I don't want to go further than that because we've done stuff like that at a wastewater treatment plant. I've been here 26 years, and a year later or a year and a half later, we're right back in the same boat, and we have to spend twice as much money. So I want to see this all done. As long as they got the equipment here, you might as well pull it all and do it.
And I think that's a general consensus of the council, Councilor Bearable, and with respect to you, Paul and Jim, that we want to do that. But from a procedural perspective, I think we're looking for, you know, some kind of a flow chart or some kind of information that comes before us, so we understand, you know, what the costs, where they're coming from, what they are. Just one simple document we can look at, so we could make that determination, that motion moving forward, with the total cost of a clear mind. So I think in answer to that, we could get that accomplished by Tuesday in which to do so. So Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I will make a motion to direct staff to present a plan with the ad alternates, just so we can see how it breaks down for discussion at Tuesday's meeting.
Thank you. Motion by Councillor Johnson. Is there support? Support by Councillor Beyondich. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Paul. Anything else, Paul? Great. All right.
Item number 3 is review the fireworks proposals for 2022.
These are quotes for both the Land of the Loon fireworks and the 4th of July?
Nope, 4th of July and Festival of Trees.
I'm sorry, Festival of Trees, excuse me. Yes, thank you. Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. From our city clerk's email, I think she was also asking if we want a 1-year, 2-year, 3-year contract. I think it would, how many years have we used J&M for? Quite a while.
It's been 4 right now. So we did a 3-year and then a 1-year, and then.
And have we been satisfied with the product?
Well, the comments from the public, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, they were wonderful. They got really good reviews. I know last November, I don't know if it's because it was colder and it was brighter because it was colder. A lot of really good reviews last November.
So based on that and having good reviews, I think it would make sense to do a 3-year so we get the extra product in lieu of a discount. I think they add up to 15% if we do a 3-year in product. So I would go ahead and move that forward at a 3-year with the expenditure of, is it 2 separate expenditures, Pam? One for $10,800 and one for $10,200? Okay, I would move that forward.
Okay, moved by Councillor Paulson. Is there support? Support by Councillor Johnson. It's a really it's a good, you'll have a 3-year contract, get a big bang for our buck. Right? Yeah, please don't send me emails about that. So moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Freely.
And we are budgeted accordingly.
Yes, sir. Sherry?
Sorry about that. I budgeted 18,000. Unbeknownst to me that this was going to go up, but we're fine.
Okay.
Thank you. Moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Item number 4 is approve the request from Mesabi Symphony Orchestra for inclusion in the 2023 budget.
That would be for next year. So looking for if it would be included in the discussion part of the budget, or, okay, thank you. Looking for council action with respect to this request by the Mesabi Symphony Orchestra.
Also move, Mayor, the 5,000 a year.
Moved by Councillor Baraboo. Is there support? Support by Councillor Beyondich, is that correct? Thank you. Is there any further discussion? Councillor Baraboo.
Let me modify. The motion should have been $5,000 for the 23 budget. I didn't include that in the motion.
Yeah, right, yeah. And I think you did mention that the first time, but as a clarification, include that in there as well. Thank you, Councillor Baraboo. It's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is number 5, review the proposed golf course restaurant lease from tenant.
Thank you. We have the representative from Northern Divide here and taking a look at that. And I know there's been some discussion with our city attorney with respect to this commercial lease. We did get a copy in our email and now a copy of this in paper form here before us. So I will start with our city attorney, Brian Lindsay. Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. And I'll try to keep my comments fairly brief as the document speaks for itself. So at the last meeting, I was given authorization to meet with Mr. Honkanen and to discuss the terms of the agreement. After that authorization was given, I received some guidance both from Ms. Sibenes as well as some information that came to me from various council members. And then I did, late last week, on Thursday last week, sat down with Mr. Honkin and we went through the agreements line by line to try and come up with the best terms that we could reach through the negotiations. And as the council reviews the document, what you will notice is that not all of the guidance that I had received is incorporated exactly as it was received into this document, but what we have prepared is the closest terms that we could come to without one side or the other getting up and essentially leaving the room during the negotiations. And so while this may not be a perfect agreement for either side, what you have before you is the closest terms that we could come to where there seemed to be some common ground. I would note for the council some of the primary items that were discussed and that were sent along to me, including some cleaning provisions and some other things have been incorporated. I'll note at the conclusion of the contract, we did include an additional. It is at paragraph 17 on page 7. We did include some additional language to address the harmonious use piece of it, talking about what types of music and what type of atmosphere would be created during the periods where golf was also taking place to make sure that it works. I would note that the term of the agreement is 1 year, but there is the ability to extend so long as there exists no defaults at the end of that 1 year period for up to 3 years. And then the other primary piece that I would note is that the rental amount did stay at $3,000. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions as the discussion commences.
Thank you. I just have one question, then we'll move on. Item number 4 on page 2, the early termination lease was intentionally omitted. So can you give us a little insight on that?
I can, Mayor. So during the negotiations, there was some good discussion had about the interaction between two provisions. The first provision being the early termination, what was essentially paragraph 25L of the old agreement, giving a number of days for just a clean separation. And then interacting with that provision, there was a secondary discussion about some new language or some additional language that's included in this lease, which is essentially a release of claims. And so essentially when the lease ends or terminates, there's a release of claims that will prevent kind of an ongoing connection or litigation between the parties, assuming everybody's fulfilled their obligations. And the concern very quickly became apparent that based on kind of the history that's existed with this lease and based on concerns about longevity on the part of the tenant essentially asked that the city choose either an early termination clause or a release clause. And given the current status of things, I steered the direction more toward the release and waiver clause as opposed to the early termination, because the lease also contains standard default clauses and procedures that in the event of a material and ongoing default, there is provision to terminate the agreement. So,
thank you, Brian. And we'll go around the council first, and then and we'll take a look, and maybe we probably would like to hear from Mr. Honkin as well. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really uncomfortable that the renter is writing the lease. I've never rented a building where I've had the option to change the terms of the lease anywhere. And I really am not okay with the $3,000 staying the same. That is something that is a budgetary item. It is, I believe it is fiscally irresponsible to continue to maintain equipment and building that is being used by other people for $3,000 a month with no escalator in it. My preference is to have the city write the lease, and then it can either be agreed to or not agreed to by the tenant. I'm not comfortable with this. I don't know of any other places, and if someone can help me, I don't know of any other places within the city where the renter or the user gets to define the conditions of city property and how it's used. If someone could provide some clarification, I'd appreciate that, but I will not support this lease, and my need is for the city staff to write a lease that fits what the city needs, and then decisions can be made from there. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go around the room. I have some comments to make with respect to Councilor Johnson about how the lease is written. But let's go through the rest of the councilor first, as we hear from all of them. Councilor. Okay, very good. Councilor Baraboo.
Yeah, I'm disappointed, Councilor Johnson. This was done with our attorney that had our stuff that we wanted to put into this lease, along with the Kerfield's attorney. And I don't know if other people were included in the meeting or just the attorneys. Can you answer that, Brian?
In the direct negotiation, it was myself and Mr. Honkinen, but I did seek input from Ms. Seabenes going into that session.
And I'm assuming, Eric, you had input from your client too, correct? I did. Okay. So in my dealing with contracts and stuff over all the years I was in business as a pharmacist, and I did a lot of that, you let the attorneys bang out the stuff once the input has been put in. And we put the input in at that one meeting for Brian to work with Mr. Honkinen. So I think this is not a good scenario that Councilor Johnson is asking for. It's already been done with input from our staff and from Mr. Honkinen's employee, or I should leasee at the golf course. So I don't have a problem. I've read this over, read it more than once, and I don't see an issue. It's got the things we asked for at our meeting. So
I'd like to clarify. It wasn't input from me. What I relayed to Brian was input the council had given to me. A few council members had mentioned they wanted.
That's what I meant
and
by
what
that.
they mentioned is not in this contract. There's quite a few things that the council members told me they wanted in there that did not make it into this lease.
Okay, was that brought back to you then, Brett? The things
This
that
is
weren't
what's
put
been
in?
brought back. This was after that conclusion.
Okay. So then I guess the only thing is what's missing then, because we don't have a sheet of what's missing then. That we wanted.
The dollar amount was discussed.
Okay.
The right to terminate a contract at any time when we feel we need to get out of a contract.
Well, you got to give notice in any contract.
Absolutely.
I've ever been involved with. You don't.
I wasn't disputing that. It was just that we need to have an out clause.
Which we do.
We do. The ability to inspect the property. It is ours. We need to make sure it's cleanliness.
You can do that anytime.
That was reversed out of there.
It continues in, but there's the process got elongated a bit.
Okay, I don't have a problem with what I've read and seen. I think it's a reasonable contract. It's only going for 1 year with an extension in the end, if we so choose to. Correct, Brian?
It is, the initial term is 1 year, but the extension periods are the right of the tenant so long as they're not in default on any provision of the contract.
That's normal in any contracts where you have a leasee that might want to continue through a leased product.
And Mayor, if I may.
Please, Brian.
And I will just expand just a bit on what Ms. Seabenes has indicated. She is absolutely correct that everything that I had received by way of guidance has not been incorporated in. As indicated, for example, with the early termination for no cause and the release, there were certain things where just based on the parties, what Mr. Honkin and I did was set out to push the terms to go as far as we could before one party or the other would break. And then when I brought it back to the council, to qualify my presentation to the council by indicating not all of the guidance that I received has been put in place, but where it hasn't been put in place, there were reasons in the negotiation. For example, the trade-off between the early termination and release clause, there's reasons why those things didn't make it back. And then the terms that are presented back are for the council's consideration to approve or not approve.
Contracts that I've been involved with privately, not through the city as much, but privately, you don't terminate ever a contract without cause in there. You have to have a remediation step in there to fix things in any contract I've been involved with. And there's so many days or so many weeks that you allow that to happen. You go back and re-inspect then if there's problems. You can't just throw somebody out. That gives you the ability to just kick anybody out at will. And I can't stand that from a legal perspective. I will not vote to suspend this contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Baraboo. Before I go to Councilor Paulson, I had some thoughts. I want to make sure that I don't forget them moving forward. So, from a historic perspective, and I know what may go on in one or two councilors' mind is, what does this have to do with this lease? I think it has a lot to do with the lease, because years ago when we sent this for RFP for golf course management, it was inherited by another party who was related, and the individual retired, and then a relative took over. And at that time, the negotiation was that the city was operating that entire restaurant. The city was responsible for purchasing everything. The city was responsible for maintaining everything. The city paid all the utilities as opposed to that. And each and every year, for maybe the exception of one, but during the course of the majority of the time, the large majority of the time, that restaurant operated as a loss to the city. The city paid all the expenditures and more, because there was a loss of anywhere from $23,000 to $47,000, whatever. I'm paraphrasing here because I don't know the exact amount. And so we decided that wasn't working. So when we offered this contract that's currently in place to the tenant that was there, it declined. And so we put it out for bids. And here we are today. We did a selection process. Many of us were sitting here about that in the very beginning. We vetted out all the RFPs that came out. We chose Mr. and Mrs. Kerfeld in order to divide as the individual who operates the facility. So now they pay $3,000 a month, or have been paying $3,000 a month, which is more than we were getting from the previous tenant. They make an investment as well. And I look at it as, we have to look at it as a business perspective, as those of you who own businesses in town take a look at the cause and effect. But I look at the community service and how that's provided as well. So, looking at the lease agreement, it's a one-year deal with some options to extend moving forward. And as long as they meet the requirements of that lease, as we had some concerns about the lease and about not maintaining the terms and conditions of the lease. Now it's in the lease, and we have an opportunity to depart ways or sever in the event that these clauses aren't complied with. So I guess, yes, the lease was formally presented. Some adjustments were made, but we were the individuals who here as an elected body, and we directed and delegated our city attorney to work with the contract and with some suggestions that we made with respect to clause. And our city attorney, Brian Lindsay, put together a part of this lease, added and subtracted, did some other things, negotiations went forward. So whether the lease was presented by us or whether the lease was presented by them, during the course of the RFPs, there was a lot of RFPs went about what was going to transpire. This is what we had asked for before, and so we negotiated a lease with them, which we would have done with any other RFP. We just happened to choose the Northern Divide as that. So that moving forward, you know, yes, we could put different language in this contract, but I'm comfortable moving forward with the one-year lease. They do provide the good service, and there, some of the questions and concerns that were addressed with respect to noise and those other things are listed here. So as long as the compliance is made with respect to this lease, I'm willing to move forward and approve and support this lease as written, as presented by both parties. Thank you. Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So the way that I understand the lease that we received initially from our city attorney, and this current one that's on our desk, there isn't much in there that was requested that remained. But I do feel the reason that we got to this point was some basically lack of making payments. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't have been in this position to come back to the renewal of a contract. So I feel like there's enough teeth in this to, so Mr. Honkonen, basically what we're saying is, if there's any default, there's a curable time frame and a curable process. If the tenant fails to cure within that time, there is an out clause, so that does satisfy some of what was discussed. Is that how you both of you attorneys address that portion?
Mayor, if I may.
Please, Brian.
Yep, that is my understanding.
Okay, so that to me is satisfactory. So I hate to ask Britt, and I don't know if you can pull this, but it's an email from, let me see. I'm sorry, I had it pulled up here. 1/17/2018. And it's, the title of it is Interviews for Proposed Restaurant Lease. I don't know if you can find that. And I can email it back to you. But included in that, and this is just a segue, I apologize, Eric Honkonen, for segueing here. But it has a really nice breakdown of the expenses that I believe was procured by Wendy Summers on 6/14/2017. And it gave an amazing breakdown with everything, with all the phones, postage, chemicals, cleaning supplies, yada, yada. And just to confirm what the mayor was saying, back in 2017, that operation was running $101,000 in the red. So that's why we set forward to do more of a lease contract to alleviate the city from going further into the red. Now, the one thing that I can see in this lease, and I don't know if you found that. If not, I can email it. Yeah. So one thing that I did see in this lease, and since we aren't doing the full 3-year renewal, we're doing a 1-year. Based upon that 1 year, if everything's satisfactory and there's no defaults, it'll go into year 2. Same thing with year 2, go into year 3. But there, like what Councilor Johnson is saying, there's no like elevator for like cost of increase. Like we just sat here and heard the cost of stainless steel is going up or whatever, you know, what if X, Y, or Z goes up? So would there be any room for cost of whatever we could foresee to be added into that as an elevator incremental for their rent to protect the city from going backwards? Should the cost of gas go up, since the city pays for the utilities? Since when this original lease was drafted, it was to pay for to cover the cost of the utilities, which were running approximately $3,000 a month on average. And some months they run more, I believe, and some months they run less. But would that be something that we could add in, or an addendum to the contract, just to make sure that I guess, Mr. Honkonen, if you understood where the original lease was, I think you were here when it was drafted, because I think you drafted it. But the original intention of Councilor Jorgensen at the time was setting that to make sure that the city was basically being reimbursed for the utility expense. So if that utility expense should exceed what is in year 1, year 2, and year 3 within this contract, would your client be amenable to that adjustment?
I would have to go to my client because that would be a kind of a significant issue that has not been discussed up to this point in terms of having an additional amount auto adding into a lease. I can speak from my own, this is me, in my firm, in my building, I just did my lease for 5 years, and that was something that the landlord wanted, and that was something that I was like, when I renewed my lease, I was like, absolutely not, because once that goes in, you'll never get it out. And so we worked and negotiated a lease that worked for both parties with terms, you know, in a commercial sense. We went back and forth and came up with terms that worked for both parties. And sometimes it's more money or rent, sometimes it's less space, sometimes it's different changing of responsibilities. And so there's different ways of dealing with something. Money isn't always the number one issue when you're dealing with a commercial lease, because you're dealing with a piece of ground. So there's a lot of different responsibilities that come around that. So it's a matter of balancing those and different legal risks that you want to consider and take. And so to answer your question, that has not been brought up in our discussions up to this point. And that would be a significant
and I'm surprised that it didn't come up between the two of you. I don't know if it did or did not, because that was one of the actual specific requests that this council had for the increase or incremental change or whatever could be negotiated going forward, due to the fact that it stayed at the $3,000 per month since the original contract.
If I may.
Brian?
And there was discussions about raising the price and the different costs that is associated with running the building now as opposed to previously. And what I understood or what I took away was that there was a pretty hard line at the price.
Okay, so, but what if the council says, well, that's a hard line for us because we don't want to have to absorb any additional utility costs, and the costs of gas are increasing, and that building runs on gas and electricity, is that correct? I mean, those are the two, obviously water, sewer, whatever, but it's the heating sources and the primary operational source is gas and electricity.
Brian, please.
And Councilor, so it kind of brings, that kind of leads us to an additional discussion. So ultimately, the council has three choices today. The council could vote this lease down and just say that this isn't the lease that the council wants. The city could, as a second option, approve the lease and enter into this lease, or the council could make a contingent approval, essentially say, look, we'll approve the general lease on the contingency that the rent is adjusted by a certain amount, or that an escalator clause is added. The one thing I would caution on escalator clauses, we're probably going to want to set it at a known amount and not. I mean, you see a lot of leases tie things to like the consumer price index and those sorts of things. That gets a little bit. It's a little bit more difficult to negotiate because of the uncertainty. And part of what I understand or understood as a key piece of the contract for the tenants, and obviously Mr. Honkinen can speak for them more than I can, but what I understood is one of their primary concerns was kind of just security within the space, and then and knowledge about what their budgets would be moving forward so that they could plan.
Okay, and I can appreciate that, Mayor, if I may continue to address this, if you don't mind. I can honestly appreciate that, but any business owner that owns a business and the cost of utilities goes up, they have to budget accordingly to those incremental increases within whatever electricity, sewer, water, steam may be. So for them to be operating in there we were running, I think, Sherry, you gave an average, I think it was like $2,807 and some dollars was maybe the last average that you had sent an email for utilities, but that was based on over a course of 12 months and not maybe specifically like during winter months or whatever, and then we pay half starting in the summer months. The city pays half, so it is a little confusing. But my concern is that as electricity rates or steam rates increase, and I'm not talking about consumer price indexing or increasing in that manner, I'm talking about the city would be still going in the hole then to operate this facility, when if you owned a building, you would have to be responsible for either rent or the mortgage on the building, plus the utilities. So this lease was originally crafted to basically get the city at a break-even point. So if those costs are increasing, I don't know why the city should be absorbing those, and that was something very specific that this council had, or some councilors had asked to have included in this lease contract. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Paulson. And before we go to Councilor Beyondich and then to Councilor Freely, when I remember that during the discussions of the original lease, we looked at what the costs associated with in the winter and the summer months, and had to come up with some kind of a number, and $3,000 was the number because it was a little above what the average was for the time. Now, the golf course operates, the Northern Divide operates that in the wintertime, but when the summertime comes and the golf course is, and comes into play, you know, the city has the golf course, runs the golf course operations, so there's a cost associated with the utilities to there. So if you look at, so when we looked at the overall cost over a 12-month period, what the cost average was, it was under $3,000, and so we set it at $3,000 at that time as a result of that, because we were making, we pay part of the utilities in the summertime because the golf course, is that correct? Do we? Hey, we do. Yeah, so thank you. That was, so we had to find some kind of a happy medium, and when you looked at having an incremental increase every year, we don't know what those utility costs were. So maybe they went down or maybe they go up, so overall on an average, when you look at what the average was, it was less than $3,000 a month, and that was the impetus for the reason to set at $3,000 a month at that particular time. So just a little history with respect to that. Councilor Beyondich, and then over to Councilor Freely. Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. And Mr. Honkinen, I'm sorry, last week, or the last meeting we had, I had my light on and it didn't, you had left before I was able to ask my question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. But I did specifically ask if the council was going to have input on this. And I don't know that we had a whole lot of, I mean, we may have talked about it, but we didn't have a whole lot of input in here, in this. And the $3,000 for me also was questionable at the time we are at now. And then the 3% charged after the 10th of the month. There's really nothing in there for after that, because we let this go for about 7 months and nothing was really done. So that part of it, there has to be something in there for me that we just can't keep going month after month and we just keep adding a 3% charge. Something has to be done when bills aren't paid. And as far as the contract, I sort of agree with our city attorney writing that, because when you're in business, you don't let your client, I mean, it's great that you two are talking and having input, but I never had anybody write a contract for me when I had my business. I set the ground rules. And what is your recommendation to us on this?
Brian,
I'm putting you on the spot.
Options. He gave us 3 options, but could you please answer Councilor Beyondish's question?
Thank you, Mayor. And Councilor, the answer to your question is kind of a difficult one, because I'm not making a recommendation on this. What I did was I had a negotiation, as the council authorized me to. I reached what I believed was were about as far as we could push the terms, and then I present it back to the council. And I'm very candid that everything that I received as guidance is not included within this language. I pushed on some of the issues that I believed were driving, such as the expanding the cleanliness provision, providing for some remedies there, and some ability to create a default just based on the cleanliness of the space. Some of the atmosphere stuff. Candidly, the rent was, the dollar amount for the rent was a tough conversation. And I understand, also quite candidly, that the utility costs of the building have gone up, and have conferred with Ms. Sibenes, and I understand the average at this point for all utilities to run the entire building for the year, average is about $4,400 a month. And so, you know, I'm not, all of that information is out there, and when your question is, what is my recommendation? The recommendation is that the council does exactly what it's doing here, discuss the terms, and see if there's, you know, a contingency that could be added to approve the agreement, whether it's acceptable as written or whether it's not acceptable as written. So I'm sorry that doesn't seem like an answer, but the only answer that I can give you is the presentation of this to the council, it's now within the council's prerogative to consider whether the terms get us close enough to agree or whether there's something else that needs to be done.
Thank you. So the utilities now are up to $4,400 a month.
If that's the total, yeah.
Okay. If that building was strictly used for the restaurant, but it's being also used for catering, which is another part of the business, and another money stream. So I am kind of hung up on the utilities, that we are not even covering the cost of what the utilities are in that building. So I am not ready to sign off on this yet. I think we still need a little bit more work, and I think we need to address everything that we had talked about. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I have one clarification that I'd like to ask, and that is, this is $4,400 a month. That's average it's at the average for a 12-month period, or?
Total of the year divided by 12.
Okay, so the total of the year divided by 12. So, okay, that clarifies, that changes a little bit for me as well. So, thank you. Councilor Freelieb, and then back over to Councilor Paulson. Councilor Bear, would you have your light on too?
I had mine on too, but I put it on after there too.
Okay, so we'll go Councilor Freelieb, Councilor Paulson, then over to Councilor Bear. Councilor Freelieb.
So there was a list of items that we wanted to have added into the new lease that were objected to during the negotiations between you and Mr. Honkinen, correct?
There were the list of items, and as we discussed those items, there were certain trade-offs during the negotiation, yes.
And so one of them obviously was the monthly the monthly rent.
Correct.
And did we suggest an increase in that?
Correct. I did indicate during the course of the negotiations, and not to get too much into the actual details of the negotiation, but I did suggest that the cost of running the building had gone up, and I do believe that I used the figures that were supplied to me.
And the key piece for me for why we even came to this point was the 7 months in arrears. And the concession made by the Kerfelds was that they were willing to, as a part of the lease, have an automated deposit to the city on the first of each month. Is that still, was that objected to as well, or?
Mayor, if I may.
Brian?
Thank you. So I'll address a couple of points here. The first point, as it relates to the auto withdrawal, that has been established and it is currently in effect. And my understanding is that that would remain in effect.
And need not be a part of the lease as language? I think it should.
And that can be added. I don't think there'd be any objection.
No objection.
Yeah.
Right, thank you.
And then the second item I just wanted to touch on, though it's not, I don't think, immediately responsive to your comments, but perhaps is, there was some comment or some conversation about, from Councilor Beyondich, about the default in paying rent. All of the provisions necessary to enforce that rent default are in the lease, including that 3%. And the enforcement piece of it is a policy decision for the city. Because essentially, at the point when those arrears were accumulating previously, we could have, as a city, stepped in and asserted our contractual rights at any point. And so we just have to kind of be resolved that, and just kind of give notice that we would intend to watch those things closely and specifically moving into the future.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councilor Freelieb? Okay, Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. And we just received, okay, so I will just say that I'm pretty frustrated at this point, because somewhere down the line when we were talking about all this, received an email from Sherry showing that I think it was the 2,800 was an average, and I'm going to try to go back and find that. and now to find out it's $4,400 a month. Why weren't we given this documentation? Why wasn't this provided to us so we can understand when we're trying to negotiate how much our expenses are? I mean, I don't know if anyone can answer me. We're trying to negotiate in good faith, and we all know what the original premise of this lease was. It was to offset the expense of the utilities that were charged at that facility. Now, the email I just sent back to Britt actually has a breakout between the golf course utilities and the restaurant utilities. And all of the above, whatever, if it was fuel, if it was chemicals, if it was linen, whatever else it was on here, I guess I'd have to go back and look. And my expectation when I'm trying to make an informed decision is that I would be given the proper documentation so that I would be educated when I'm making this decision. Now I'm going back to a document from 2017, which is extremely detailed and broken out, and I have absolutely nothing to go from, other than now I'm being told verbally that it's going up to $4,400 a month. I'm actually really frustrated, and I'm not going to make a decision on this at all today.
Oh, okay, thank you. Brian, could you kind of address Councilor Paulson's issue?
And Councilor Paulson, the one item that I did want to bring up, that $4,400 number that I had indicated, I believe, and I'll stand corrected if I can be, that $4,400 includes all of the total cost of running the building and isn't reduced by the offset for the amounts that the city would pay during the golf season.
Okay, then that needs to be, we need that in writing. We need to be able to look at these financials and understand when we're negotiating what position the city's going to be put in if we make a 3-year commitment at $3,000 a month without having those financials in front of us. Why are we sitting here negotiating? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Thank you, Councilor Paulson. Councilor Bearable, and then over to Councilor Johnson, and then over to Councilor Beyondich. Councilor Bearable.
Yeah, that $4,400 needs to be shown line for line for line item, if that's what it is, because I don't recall it ever being that much, because you got to split when the golf season starts. It shouldn't be $3,000 without money coming in from the golf operation for expenses. How much are those? Because they start opening in usually late April, early May. So you're talking maybe, what, 3 months in the summertime, we've given a break to the restaurant people, June, July, August, maybe into September.
The golf course open from May, Thursday, the third week in April, through the October 15th.
Yeah, so we got to look at all those numbers. I'm not happy with hearing this $4,400 figure, because I've never seen that before either. So,
Councilor Bearable, maybe Sherry can answer that for you a little bit.
No, you can't include every little thing, because the restaurant's not they're gonna pay for their own laundering right now, correct? They're going to be paying for some of their other stuff themselves that's above and beyond the $3,000. So the $3,000 goes strictly to actual expenses that the city incurs for sewer, for water. And usually if you rent a place, a lot of times that's included in your rent. Space is another thing. How much are they actually square footage? Are we figuring out by square footage, or how are we doing that? Are we prorating it to the golf course when they're open? How are we doing this? I'm not comfortable with the $4,400, because I don't think they have that much in expenses there that the restaurant should pick up.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Bearable. Sherry, could you you had your light on, could you maybe give a little clarification, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, Council. I just sent you out the monthly budget reports ending March 31st. And if you click on the restaurant one, you will see, scroll down, you'll see the expenses just for this March, for this period. Telephone was $39.15. This is all itemized, so Mr. Councilor Bearable, you will be able to see this. Utilities, $4,033.29. That's just for March. Repair of the building, maintenance of the building, we spent $394.09. repair and maintenance of equipment, $980.85. And did I just misquote? I said $394.09 for the repair of the building. Equipment expense was $980.85, and laundry was $1,343.47. So out of pocket was $6,790.85.
But a lot of those you just listed are our costs. Building maintenance, equipment are our costs.
Utilities was $4,033. So if you're looking for the lease.
Is that just for gas and electricity?
Water and sewer.
Water and sewer, okay.
And the golf course is not open yet. So this
I understand,
is what it's costing.
That. But any maintenance repairs on that building and stuff are.
We also have laundry.
Laundry there. They're taking laundry now, right? We're not doing laundry anymore.
I don't know. I'll have to check the contract. But we were doing laundry up until.
Okay, so thank you, Sherry. Anything else, Councilor Bearable?
That's good.
Okay, we'll move on.
If you increase these costs, I'm going to say one more thing. If you increase these costs by $1,400 a month, like is being suggested here, you're never going to get anybody in that restaurant. Never. Nobody will pay that kind of money for the short season that restaurant really has. They don't get that much business in the winter months. They do, at Christmas they get a lot of things there, but I don't think we'll ever rent it to anybody.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Councilor Beyondich. Did you have your light on? Councilor Beyondich, and then over to Councilor Johnson, and then over to Councilor Paulson. Councilor Beyondich.
And I think this was why we wanted this to extend through the end of the summer, so we had time to work through all of this. There was a lot. I feel uncomfortable rushing into something. There's a lot of questions that we did have that I don't feel are answered. And I am not ready to move forward on this until we have all these answered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Johnson?
Brian, just to clarify, at this point with this contract, the city has no way to cancel unless they default. Is that correct?
Thank you. Yes, the cancellation is by term or default. We don't have a for no cause cancellation provision.
Is that common in contracts?
It's a mix. Some contracts have them, some don't, and it depends on the value that the parties place on the security of the lease.
And who does that benefit in general?
In general, it benefits the tenant.
Okay. I also know, and I don't know if this didn't get passed on, I apologize. I also know that there was a request that the expiration of the contract not be in April right before the golf season starts, that it be in the fall in October. So there's a window there for the next golf season, since that is the priority of the city when it comes to maintaining that facility. And I didn't see that in here. Is that change of expiration in this contract?
Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. And Councilor Johnson, that piece of it was not built into this contract.
So, again, I'm going to say I am not comfortable with somebody else writing a contract for the city and us saying yes or no to it, even with what doesn't sound like was a real negotiating session. From what I'm picking up, it was, we are our demands. If you don't like them, too bad. This is our building. We are responsible to the citizens of Virginia. I agree $1,400 increase is too much, but looking at just last month's bills, we covered half. Yes, we are the landlords, and there are inherent costs, which is a reason why we got out of some of the bigger landlord challenges that we have had over the last few years. It's why we're looking at other buildings that we are landlords in that we don't want to do that anymore. I just feel, and I agree with Councilor Beyondich, and that was the point of my motion 2 meetings ago, was to extend this through the Gulf season so we can spend time to write a contract that is fiscally responsible to the citizens of Virginia. That it is something that that will help the golf course, it will help the golfers, it will help bring in revenue, and go from there. I just don't know what else to say. I feel like the other thing I'm very concerned about is if we approve a lease of a city building based on what the tenant wants, we are setting a very dangerous precedent that anytime we lease a building, people are going to come to us with their own contracts, and we're going to have to spend time like this negotiating for something that should be pretty black and white when it comes to what we have expectation for as a council. And I will reiterate that the whole idea was for the $3,000 4 years ago was to, one, give folks an opportunity to start their business, whoever chose to be there, and two, to maintain utility costs. And if I recall correctly, the discussion was there will be a time when this goes up because we want to make sure we're paying utilities, and there's other costs involved. At this point, if we're going to split hairs about which month is what, I'd like to see that the utilities are or the rent per month is listed out. Maybe it's more in the wintertime because it's all by themselves, and in the summertime it's less. A contract can say anything we want it to, but where we are now, this is not the City of Virginia lease. This is a private lease that the city needs to agree to. When we deal with other companies with their lease terms, sometimes we have to agree to their lease terms unless it's illegal, period. When it comes to a lot of stuff, we've had that discussion when it's come from companies that come to us. These are their lease terms. If we want to utilize their services, unless it's against Minnesota statute, we have to say yes or no. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to take that on this. We're losing money every month. We're not even close to breaking even, and we have to make some attempt to at least rectify some of the difference. And so I won't support this lease at all. I would like to see our attorney and our city staff write a lease and move forward from there.
Thank you, Councilor Johnson. Before we go to Councilor Beyondich, or Councilor Paulson, I'd just like to address a couple comments you made, Councilor Johnson, with respect to that. And a lot of the concerns that you addressed here, are concerns that we all have, including myself. But as far as the tenant writing the lease and us agreeing to it, I don't think that's, I don't look at it from that perspective. I look at it from anybody can bring forth a lease, what they want. They want to lease a part of a building and want to do this or that. We don't have terms listed out like we do at the Monitors or at the Iron Trail Motors Event Center. And so we look at that lease, we say, well, this is not acceptable to us. We'll negotiate the lease moving forward. We take care of that. We make adjustments. Whether it's in the private sector or the public sector, we direct and delegate staff to negotiate, which we did. They did negotiate a lease, whether it comes from where we provided the lease or they provided a lease. You're coming to a terms in a compromising manner, authorizing your legal authority which to do so, and that's why I force it here today. So whether the lease is brought forth by the tenant or the release brought forth from us, the bottom line is there's a lease, we negotiate it, we're at that point now, which is on the table for us, and that's why we're discussing it today, which I think is good. So I'll go to Councilor Paulson, and then I'll ask for some comments from Mr. Honkin and Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. I just sent our city clerk, and I sent it to Britt as well, the spreadsheet from 2017, and I think Sherry just sent this one that's up to date from I believe it has 2017 in there on the top. Yeah, it goes, oh no, that's the old one. I'm not sure the one that Sherry just sent us, how far it goes back. Let me look. Okay, so that should mirror. It's hard to do this when I'm on my phone. But when I look at what was just sent for the breakup of the utilities, from the 2017 document, the restaurant utilities were $32,000 a year. And the golf course breakup of the utilities was $40,000 a year. Now, if I go to the current one of, I guess, maybe we'd have to take 2021, it's $42,000 specifically for the golf course and $25,000 for the restaurant. How did it go down almost $10,000? From 2017, it went from 31,000, or excuse me, it's on this snapshot in time on 6/14/2017, it says the utilities at that moment for the golf course were $32,200. Now on this spreadsheet, when I scroll across to 2017, that is, okay, so maybe it's 31,668. Why does it go down when utilities have gone up?
Mayor?
Sherry?
Mayor and Council, Councilor Paulson, without looking at what you're looking at, I wouldn't be able to correctly give you an informative answer. So maybe afterwards I can look at what spreadsheets you're looking at.
Well, it's the one that you just sent from, if you go to the column on the utilities column under 2000, go scroll to 2017.
I don't have 217.
It's
It's on the spreadsheet you just sent.
Sent that one.
Oh, you sent it, okay.
Yeah.
So they've been pretty consistent, going from 29,000, 27,000, 32,000, 30,000, 30,000, 29, 24, 31, 28. Now they're down to 25. Now, is that the budgeted amount for 2022? Is that the actual amount for 2021, 25,000?
Total of the two is the actual amount for 21.
Now, I'm looking just on the one line under restaurant utilities.
That's just the budget. This is what that's put in the budget system. Because they do not have separate meters. So the building comes as one utility. So Wendy breaks it out to restaurant, and then she breaks it out to
Yep, but it says above top, it says actual. So they have the current year and then the budget.
Yep.
But the rest of them behind that date are actuals.
And that's just how we broke it out in the budget. 2017 is
so
when
we really have no way of knowing.
The total cost is the two together, the golf course and the
so
restaurant.
it's like $70-something thousand annually. If you add well, you're putting $25,000 at the restaurant.
Restaurant portion.
And then you're increasing on the golf course side.
Correct.
Which in the flip years haven't been like that.
Correct. Back when Checo had it, we owned the building, so it was just our responsibility. We paid Checo to be there. He didn't have any responsibility to pay any.
I understand that, but the breakout should be the same. It should be the same. You're allocating restaurant versus golf course. So you were heavy on the golf course. Let me look at this. So it's right here. You go from 2017 and it jumps from 45,000 now to 51,000 on the golf course side. So it's a shifting of numbers. So this doesn't tell me anything.
Correct, because we don't have any way to actually define how much is really restaurants.
But we shifted those numbers, so
Correct.
You can shift numbers any way you want.
Correct.
So I don't like how this is going down at all.
If I may.
Gary, do you see the difference from 17 for the last two, well, especially from last year? It's a flipping of the expense from one side to the other, so that it shows that the restaurant is less utilities and the golf course side is heavier on utilities. I want to know what the actual is, and I understand if you're saying there's no way to break it down, but what made us switch to that allocating it differently? It looked like it was more of a, I don't know, 2/3, 1/3, or however that looks. But the expenditures are about between 70 and 75,000 annually on utilities. That's what if you add the two, the restaurant plus the golf course utilities, it's approximately $70-something thousand annually. But if you look from the prior years, especially 2017, I'd have to look in 18 now to see, and I'm on my phone doing this. But why were those numbers shifted heavier to the golf course usage side and less to the restaurant usage side? If you take $72,000 and divide it by 12 months, it's
$36,000. 3,000 was it?
No,
30.
it's almost,
Yeah, $6,000 a month, right?
yeah, it's $6,000 a month. Now we're being told it's $4,400 a month. Prior to that, I got an email, or we got an email saying it was $2,800 a month. So what is it? You can't really say it's $4,400 a month if you're only putting $25,000 as a budgeted expense for utilities on the restaurant side. If you do that, then you take $25,000 and divide that by 12, and it looks like it's only $2,083 a month.
And if I may,
Math doesn't make sense here.
no, and if I may, we had the same issue when we tried to figure this out back in 2017, and we looked at the cost, figuring half for the golf course, half for the restaurant. I remember talking about that specifically, and if you take a look at the example they provided, at $6,000 a month times 12 is $72,000. You divide by that by 2, that's $3,000 a month for a golf course, $3,000 a month for, it just makes sense. So that's why we set the thing at $3,000, even though it was a little less back then. We set it at $3,000 with the anticipation that there may be an increase.
Actually, it's a little more, but the way that we're allocating it in the budget is not showing an accurate depiction of utility usage on the restaurant side. It's gotten heavier on the golf course side. If you look at the spreadsheet that we just received, and if you look at the one that I sent, I don't know if it got emailed to everyone yet, from 2017, that snapshot from Wendy, and it's basically the same template that we're pulling this information, this numbers from. But if you look, the cost is flipped. The expense side has flipped. It's heavier on the golf course side than on the restaurant side, when the restaurant usage should be heavier than the golf course side. So it doesn't, I understand when you add them together and divide them, you still get $3,000. But what we're saying is, someone just said $4,400 a month. Like, none of this makes any math sense to me right now.
Well, you're looking, if I may, you're looking at the actual $72,000. And so it's easier to break that down. So you're looking for some kind of, and we are, I think, too, as well. What's the accurate number, right?
Well, what I'm trying to say, going back to, I guess, to land this plane, is that if there is an increase in utility cost, we need to know what that is, and then I would think that we should have some sort of an addendum in the lease contract so that the city isn't going backwards in the utilities portion of that. But if you don't allocate it correctly on this spreadsheet, so because you only have $25,000 allocated, and that's not accurate, according to the actuals from the previous years.
Mm-hmm.
So until that gets rectified and we understand what the math is, we need to understand what the math is.
Yeah, and I understand the procedural issues with respect to the specifics of it, how it's budgeted out. You know, for me, you know, peeling away the onion as we move forward with what action, one of 3 actions we're going to be taking today to move this to the next council meeting or whatever, the 3 actions, one of the 3 options we're going to have is that if you take the actual cost, $72,000 at this point right now, a year, right? $72,000. You divide that $72,000 by 12, which comes to what? $6,000. You divide that by 2, half for the golf course and half for the restaurant. That's $3,000 a month, and that's where we're at right now. Now, there's ways, this number, why is it heavy on the golf course side, why is it heavy this side? It's all about budget and those kind of things. But the bottom line, the actual expenditures are this, and they're paying for half the actual expenditures for the entire year. So, I mean, you know, the clarification was what we need, that's true. However, you know, I just look at what the lease says, and how we're moving forward with the lease. So there are a lot of procedural issues, internal issues to talk about with respect to budget. But I think that we have, once again, I'm going to reiterate the fact that it's a lease that was negotiated between both parties, regardless of who brought it forth in the first place. So you're looking for some breakdown of that information, Sherry. Will you be able to provide that breakdown with respect to by looking to all these utilities each month and then determining, a breakdown how that's budgeted out?
Thank you, Mayor.
Sherry?
Council. Going forward here, and that's where we seem to be, is at a new starting point. I would suggest that since the utilities, just going by March's, were $4,033.29, those are utilities for the restaurant. We could go and take the average from January, February, March, April utilities and figure out that's what roughly they are costing every month, because then we start the new golf course will be opening up in May, hopefully. And that added amount on the utilities is a difference, okay, for the golf course. And to me, let's make it simple. Just keep it simple. There's the extra increase was the golf course. This is, and come to us bottom line average monthly that will cover the majority of those utilities. I think if we're going to try to get it right down to the penny, we're not going to. And then I need to know too, going forward, do we pay the laundry? Do we, there's some items in here that I think were all included in that 4,400, I mean.
Okay. We'll go to Councilor Johnson first, and then I'd like to hear from Eric. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I think that we need to have more information before we continue to discuss this when it comes to the breakdowns. And I would like to move that we set a special meeting for the potential of closed discussion with our attorney so that we can get a solid stand on what our hard lines are and go from there, because we're going to banter back and forth. I'm having a little trouble with there being a hard line that no, we won't pay more for rent. When Mr. Kerfield stood in front of us a couple of weeks ago and said they've had 2 record years. Last year was a record year, and this year was already a record year. And so for there not to be any willingness to negotiate an increase in rent like everything else has gone, I don't know of any other place in the world, really, where there is zero consideration for raising rent after 4 years. I struggle with that. So my motion is to set a special meeting to continue this discussion with the potential of it being closed for contract negotiation.
Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Councilor Johnson. And would you please read back that motion before we ask for a second?
Set a special meeting regarding the lease contract for the golf course restaurant with the possibility to close the meeting regarding negotiations.
Is that correct, Councilor Johnson?
Yes, thank you.
Is there support?
I'll support.
Support by Councilor Paulson. Is there any further discussion with respect to this? Councilor Bearable.
Are you suggesting a date there at all, Steve? Because I've got a really full calendar the rest of this week.
No, I would leave that up to staff to figure out because of that reason.
Okay.
Yeah, so staff will figure it out, what's best amenable for all of us. We all have schedule conflicts moving forward, and we may not have a full council with respect to that, but we'll try to have a full council based upon the dates that are shown. So there's a motion on the floor and support. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Honkonen.
Thank you. So I've been texting back and forth and trying to understand. I'd like to know where the laundry line item is coming from because my clients are confused because they do all their own laundry.
Oh, we pay for the rags, for the carpets, for the rugs, for the bar rags. We pay for all that.
So that's what. So that just is helping me understand because it was. I think when people are saying like linens as opposed to something, they might get confused in what that is. I mean, if we use with regard to the utilities, where my client is renting 1,100 square feet on a 5,304 square foot building. So if you do the math on that, it would be $912 a month that would be associated for the lease space, $4,400 amount. Client is also paying for the property tax amount of $750 a year. I don't know if that was. The other thing is that like part of this is that like it's two parties that have to come together to make an agreement here. I would note that this lease that you're looking at was drafted by Mr. Lindsay, like not me. This is his lease. Can I be clear on that? Your city attorney drafted the lease that you're looking at. I did not. Okay? So I want to be very clear on that I am not directing what Mr. Lindsay is doing or how he put his lease together other than we're negotiating together. I offered a lease before because as attorneys we often do drafting to help move the process along for one another as a courtesy. I also see it as a courtesy for the Kerfelds to be paying for offering a lease draft to the city to work from. And so that's not something that's out of bad faith or that's something that the city doesn't control. But nonetheless, this is Mr. Lindsay's lease. The issue is that my clients have until April 30th until their current lease is up. And so there's never been a motion to extend any contract over the summer. There has never been a motion that has passed in front of this council as far as I know.
Point of order, Mayor.
Hang on, just let him continue, and then we'll.
I can't. That is incorrect.
Yeah, I realize that it is incorrect.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I'll acknowledge, Mr. Councilor Johnston, that is incorrect, but please continue, and then we'll do let's do the point of order. Go ahead, Councilor Johnson, point of order.
Pam, could you refer back to the motion I made that was voted down to extend the current lease with a termination at the end of September, please?
Yeah, and that's the one that did not pass, correct? And you indicated that it did not pass before this council. But there was a motion, so would you please read that back as requested by Councilor Johnson? Thank you. And we'll just hold off for a moment here.
So there was motions from the March 22nd council meeting. The first one was moved by Councilor Johnson, supported by Councilor Beyondich to abide by section 25.1 in the lease contract for the golf course restaurant and set the contract termination date of September 30th, 2022. Ayes were Paulson, Beyondich, Johnson, Nays, Baraboo, Friedlieb, and Cuffey. Motion failed.
For that clarification. So yes, there was a motion offered to extend it. It failed in this room. Thank you for the point of order, Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Councilor Johnson. Please continue, Mr. Honkanen. I want to just point out that we did make a motion in this support and it passed that we're going to set a special meeting to vet out all this information as we move forward. So any information you provide can be included in discussion in that special meeting. So please continue, Mr. Honkanen.
Sure. I mean, what I understood that motion was to be is to terminate the contract, but the contract currently ends by its terms on April 30th. And so there was a motion to terminate the current contract, but I didn't necessarily understand it to be an extension of that contract. So what I would further say is that my client would have to also agree to that. Both parties would have to agree to the extension. And so that's the other part of this is that, when we're operating together, I think, and this is, we're working on parity between two parties. It's not necessarily like this is the way it is and this is the way it's going to be. It's like we have to try to come to a negotiated settlement on this, and that's what Mr. Lindsay and I were doing. I would also note that just in terms of, from my client's perspective, some of the things that may not have been considered is that there's been an extraordinary increase in like labor costs, the cost of food, inflation, and there's been a number of different things that have gone up in costs. I would note that, the fact that there's been what my client said was like record years also included the fact that there was also PPP money that was used, and also I think to come to his calculation in that, and then also I would say is that there was also 2 years before there was operating loss on it as well. So he was getting his business going and coming up. And so I think that, with regard to like what we're doing is again, this is an issue of like trying to come to a negotiated settlement with, that's why Mr. Lindsay and I work together to come to an agreement and negotiate out a contract. And then I run into timelines because I have an April 30th deadline. So again, I think that in my mind, what was been presented is a 1-year contract, and that, to the extent that that's kind of what we're doing to operate together, I would remind the city that there's like a mutual release clause in this that helps the city, I think, extraordinarily in its current circumstance. That might be valuable for a 1-year lease. Extremely valuable.
Okay, we do have set a date to discuss all these issues. That's why we're working off the lease that was presented by our city attorney, Mr. Lindsay, with respect to the negotiations they had with you and your clients. We have now, they're sending a special meeting to take another look at these leases and make some adjustments, getting some additional information from staff for some clarification in some of the numbers that have been bantered about. And so we're going to set that date that's amenable to all of us so we can all attend to discuss this even further. Councilor Johnson.
I would move to table further discussion into that meeting.
All right, Councilor Johnson makes a motion to table any further discussion about this and to defer it to the special meeting that's been requested as a previous motion on the floor. Is there support? Is there support?
Support.
Support by Councilor Beyondich. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Can I ask one clarifying question? Can Mr. Lindsay and I continue to work together to maybe resolve some of the minor issues that are arising on this so that we can maybe take care of some smaller issues?
We have given our city attorney to move forward with any discussion with respect to this. Is one part of that. We're going to have a special meeting. Aside from that, the negotiations can continue. We have authorized them to do so, and we have not taken away that right for him to do so. So the negotiations can continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, before we go to the next item on the agenda, let's take a quick break. Thank you very much. Okay, everybody, thank you very much. We took a really short break. We've only been through less than half the agenda, so we needed to take a break. So we'll move on to the agenda items. I think we're going to make some adjustments to that and turn this agenda back over to Britt. Britt?
Thank you. We're going to try to get Scott Duranko out of here, so I'm going to move up item number 8, recommendations for personnel action from the 2022 AFSCME Review Committee.
Scott, good morning.
Good morning.
In your packet, you'll see a memo from the committee, or from my understanding of the committee. The review committee can meet once a year based on AFSCME's agreement. If anybody has a request for a reconsideration of their position. We had 3 requests this year, and in your packet, it does explain the reasoning why that they made the decisions that they made. The first one was the accounting clerk 3. There was a recommendation to remove and reassign a few of the duties from that job to other jobs, other people in the building, but they did not recommend a wage increase. The construction codes inspector, I put in a request for a stipend increase because she has received her building official limited licensure. This kind of licensure was not required as part of her job, but it is something that she has received and does give her additional duties and abilities that she could do for the city. So it was recommended to provide a stipend in the amount of 4% of the base wage to recognize her licensure. And then the library clerk, it was a specific library clerk, Rebecca Lemanger, I don't know if I said that name right. She came forward and suggested that with the request to change her job description because she is doing work that is unique to her, that nobody else in the building does, and it aligns more closely with what an accountant or a secretarial staff would do. And so it was a suggestion of the committee that we create a new job title for her, library clerk acquisitions, create a new job description, increase the wage to $28.40, which is similar to an administrative assistant under the union contract, and to direct the library to continue to look at the job duties of all the library clerks. Those were the 3 recommendations from this year.
Okay, so the recommendations are for a committee to meet and confer and discuss these requests by the employees. Is that correct?
No, the committee, the employees put their request in. The way the AFSCME contract, there is that in the packet. It does have the actual language from the contract. What happens is that they get to put in their request. A committee forms, which is 3 people from management, 3 people from union. They review all the letters, and then once a recommendation is received, it comes to the council for approval.
Thank you for that clarification. I was looking at the other part of the personnel committee roster, so I stand corrected. Thank you. Scott?
Is there any questions that you have on this? I guess is why I'm here.
Okay, so as we look around the room for somebody's like to come on, let's take, what is the staff's recommendation moving forward? The staff and the 3, are those your recommendations? Do we have a recommendation from the review committee?
This is a recommendation.
This is a recommendation. Thank you very much for the clarification. Looking for council discussion, action, information request. Councilor Johnson.
These need to be taken up separately, or can we just move them, do a motion to move the 3 of them to the city council meeting for official approval?
That would be great.
I will move the 3 recommendations to be listed separately for approval at the city council meeting.
Thank you. Moved by Councilor Johnson. Is there support? Is there support? Is there support?
I'll support for discussion, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. A motion by Councilor Johnson and supported by Councilor Baraboo to move the recommendations from the review committee for adoption or review and a formal vote at the next council meeting. Further discussion, Councilor Baraboo. Do you have any more?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, very good. So it has been moved and supported to move this for discussion and final action by the council at the next city council meeting. Is there any further discussion? Councilor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. So when these discussions are taking place, is there a policy that we have regarding, I know it's 3 on each team, but I thought there was also a council liaison for AFSCME. Is that correct? And what is the process of when the council actually sits in instead of just receiving this, like how we sit at the personnel table and talk together? I guess I just want to know at what level does the council participate other than having 3 and 3 on each side negotiate and then bring it to the council for review? Do we have something a formal process that we undertake?
Under the contract, it specifically states that both parties shall seek final approval from the city council, is where you guys jump in at the end.
And isn't there a city council member liaison to the AFSCME union though? When you guys go into meetings like that?
Negotiations, and that was set at the time of negotiations. In the contract, it doesn't specify that there is one.
Okay, I would think that we should have some council, I'm not opposed to this, I just think that we should have some council representation going forward, and then, so this always would come before the committee of the whole and not go to a personnel committee meeting. And that's how we've done it in the past. Okay, I think I remember reviewing one as a personnel committee itself. So, I mean, so the council basically doesn't have input until it is brought forward after the conversations have been had. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paulson. Anyone else? Councillor Freely?
So I guess like thinking back in terms of employment responsibilities, it's not uncommon for an employee to have additional tasks and additional responsibilities that would be afforded, or I mean, assigned to them over the course of time. And that's not uncommon, and oftentimes is language is that other duties as assigned. Are the current job descriptions described as such? I mean, is that part of it?
Yes, all job descriptions have that.
And I guess, you know, I was like just going back to like, you know, getting additional money to run a chainsaw or to, you know, these kinds of things. Like, I don't know that I'd say that I'm troubled by that, but I mean, congratulations to you for being able to get that into your contract. But I find that remarkable that I mean, I can understand people going back to school, getting additional certification and so on and so forth, and then there should be something to compensate them accordingly for that. But they're like, if a new system is put into the library, for example, and somebody's been hired to be that person that has to become familiar with that and operate that, I don't necessarily know that there should be additional compensation necessarily if it's other duties as assigned and it's inherent in the job that's being needed to be done at the library, for example. And I don't know if I'm just talking out of turn here, but that's kind of how I see it. It's kind of like we're getting to the point where every time an employee, and not really, but I mean, we're getting to a point where employees are seeing these additional duties and responsibilities evolving into their position, and then they take away the autonomy of the city from being able to say that's all part of the duties and other duties as assigned that you would be expected to accomplish. And so I'm a little troubled by us having to piecemeal out each employee having additional things added to and additional compensation added to based on their recommendation as opposed to the city's recommendation, if that makes any sense.
Right. I understand what you're saying. Like the library position, for instance, that wage was, gosh, that was put into play, I guess, I don't know how many years ago, and being that it's so low, and the other wages for the secretarials that we have now, we're trying to bring this up to that level because the level of duties and responsibilities that they're carrying is at that level right now, is why we, at that particular job description, is why we brought that one up. And the one pertaining to Christina, that one pertained to a licensee that she's carrying, and we didn't want to give that increase in wage to that job because that job doesn't particularly have to carry that license, but she's able to do added duties with that license. You know what I mean? So that's why it came in as a stipend instead of a wage increase for that particular job. And like the accounting clerk one there we actually reset it. I believe everybody was involved in redoing the job description and then separation of duties. In return, we were able to separate that stuff and then in return not be able to give that a wage increase.
Does the city compensate for education to acquire that certification?
For the Christinas?
Yeah.
Yes. What happens when she's a building official limited, she can actually sign plan reviews now. She has the ability and the authority by the state of Minnesota to do that on behalf of the city of Virginia.
For which the city invested.
Correct.
For her to be able to do.
But it's a professional liability as well, so she has putting her name on that house plan, saying it is good, you can build your house plan, it's up to code.
I mean, we're providing the education for her to become certified to do that task for us as other duties assigned to the position that she holds.
Her position does not require her to sign plans.
Doesn't require her to what?
To sign the plans, to do plan reviews whatsoever. It requires her to assist, but not to do them completely.
So in your estimation, these are legit requests on part of the
Yep, so if
employee.
we give her this, it's agreed with her that if we give her the stipend, she's going to have to start doing residential plan reviews.
And who would have done that in the past?
Bill Cole. He advised me yesterday has 264 days left.
Then we were covered, but we were already covered. Oh, you're saying?
He's retiring soon.
Okay, all right. All right, so the recommendation from the administration is that, yes, these are legitimate requests on part of employees to have additional compensation for the additional certification and duties that have been assigned them.
I say I can see where the review committee is coming from. And when it comes to the library clerk, this library clerk in specific, the requirement for library clerks previous to the review committee was that they only had to have a high school diploma. There was no other requirement for educational responsibilities. So we hired a lot of clerks with the high school diploma requirement. Unfortunately, a lot of them have higher than that. Whereas the librarians, we have two that are AFSCME librarians underneath Jody, require a master's degree. So some of the duties that they were doing, they were very overwhelmed because years ago we used to have a person that was called a cataloger. That was their job, all they did was catalog. Over the years when we had cuts through attrition, we divided that cataloging duties to the two librarians that were there. The one librarian is extremely swamped because she had a bulk of the work. And so what we've done is we've taken some of that cataloging work and given it to this position, this library clerk acquisitions position. So now she is doing work that is technically requires a master's level degree, and she does have one. Her job doesn't require her to have a master's level degree.
So essentially, these are coming forth not only from the committee, but upon the recommendation of the department head.
Yep.
And Jody is here to explain that a little bit too. And then the acquisitions portion of it, the purchasing, Rebecca is completely responsible for all the purchasing in the library. So every book that comes in, every book that goes out, she is responsible for ensuring that is done.
The department heads have vouched for these.
And the review committee this year took a long time for us to get to this point because they called in a lot of witnesses. They called in Bill Cole, they called in Jody. We got a lot of information on all these things.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, from a procedural perspective, with respect to council involvement, like that's something for us to discuss later on down the road. It may require an addition to whatever contract language, or if you want to add somebody from the council to be part of that process or not. The way it's written now, the contract was followed. We do have a recommendation and support to move forward to the next council meeting. I think if there's some information that we want to move to change the way that committee structure works, we can negotiate that at a later time. But right now, that's what the contract reads. We have the recommendation from our staff moving forward. So is there any further discussion before we vote on to move this to the city council meeting to take further formal action? Councilor Beyondich.
Thank you. And I see the letter here from Wendy Summers. Is that pertinent to what we're deciding on today? Is that for the wage increase?
Her request was for...
or is that for the early retirement?
This is for the wage increase. She stated that she has too many duties. So the review committee, and so she was asking for compensation. So the review committee said, well, we need to segregate duties anyway. The auditor tells us that every single year. So why don't we take some of those duties away from you and get you back down to a level that's more fair to what everybody else in the office is doing.
So who will this fall on because she's not in that position anymore?
That new job description that's in there will be the new person's job description.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I would also like to revisit, and I don't know if we need to put it on an agenda, to have a council member be part of the process.
And I think that's something we need to discuss. There's a contractual language that says that, so the contract language will have to be changed, so it's not just an issue with respect to the council itself, it requires opening up the contract for new negotiations about that. So I think I think it's prudent for us to have that discussion about what we want. But once we do that, it will take a negotiation effort by reopening the contract or waiting until the next contract expires before negotiating that change in the committee structure.
When does that contract expire?
2023.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilor Beyondich. So it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion?
One additional
question. Yes, Councilor Freely.
Sherry, so these compensatory costs to the city then have been budgeted accordingly?
No, I did not budget some of this increase because I had no clue or idea. But there is a little bit of a amount that I put in there when I budget to hopefully give us a little fluff.
Like when you, like the additional percentage increase?
Right.
Okay, all right. In the contract?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Councilor Baraboo.
Just one piece of information. Every employee that's in a union in a particular job has the right to come to us to ask for a wage increase with the contract that's there, correct? But we've done that in the past where they've come to us and we decide if it's pertinent or not.
Item number 8 on that review I put in your packet, it's page 27. Item number 8 under section M says for positions which necessitates an evaluation after the February 1st cutoff date, approval of the union department director shall be required in that decision, as well as decision of the position review committee shall not be grievable. So they can request that the union and the city come forward to negotiate a new wage.
That's basically what we're doing with job description change at the same time.
This is the review committee process.
Okay. Then I don't have a problem with this.
Thank you, Councilor Baraboo. So it has been moved and supported to move this to the next council meeting for formal action. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you, Council.
To go back up to item number 6, review the rental price for amenities at the Iron Trail Motors Event Center.
Brian, thank you for your patience. I know you're a busy man. Your schedule is pretty tight, but I appreciate your patience moving forward. Thank you.
You are very welcome. This is on your agenda today at the request of several councilors. As you may or may not be aware of, when we set the price for many of our equipment things at the event center, we did that based off of pre-COVID prices. The issue that we've run into has been a customer's dissatisfaction with a decision that we made regarding table skirting, the tablecloths that go on to our round tables. We currently own enough black and white tablecloths that we can do either all black or all white tablecloths in the event center. Prior to COVID, when we priced out cleaning them and everything, is what we based our price of $3.50 for the rental for those tablecloths. After COVID, with labor increases, cost increases, and everything, the cost to clean those tablecloths went to $8 a tablecloth. So if we're charging $3.50 per tablecloth and it's costing us $8 every time we use them, that is not good business for our facility. So we researched what other facilities were doing, and through Aramark, we were able to rent square tablecloths to put on our round tables. This is the same thing that Giants Ridge and Fortune Bay does at their facilities. Our customer was not pleased that we had square tablecloths on round tables. They really want the round tablecloths. So what we are proposing that we do is add another tier for our table skirting. Right now, we just have one tier, table skirting, $3.50 per table. We are suggesting that we change that to the title of that to standard table skirting, keeping the price the same because we're already making money there, or covering all of our costs there. And then we add on another section, which is premium table skirting at $10, which covers all of our costs.
For each table?
Correct. And that is still significantly below the industry rental average.
Okay, let's start left to right this time. First, Councillor Paulson, then Councillor Freely, then Councillor Beyondich and Councillor Johnson. Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. And this was part of the request that I brought up. So in reviewing, and I would foresee it's not just this one customer. I would foresee this would be the case for a lot of wedding customers that we have round tables and square tablecloths. We own the round tablecloths. The deal with Airmark, I had called their when you go online, it's you can hit the call button and it takes you to a facility I think in Kentucky. It's an 800 number. You don't get a local number anymore, a Hibbing number. And I was told at that point that they have the rounds and we can rent the rounds and da-da-da-da-da. Upon further research that Jim Hunt and Brian did is that our local Airmark, they do not have the rounds, and the main reason that they don't have the rounds is they have no way to launder those rounds. There's specific equipment that it takes to actually to launder them. Am I correct in that?
You are correct.
Okay. So we all kind of got together at the design team and we had a discussion about this. And we looked at Lefty's Tent Rental in Grand Rapids. You can rent round tablecloths. The cost actually for I got to get this right, maybe it was 120 foot, which ours would be 100 and
ours are 100. Ours are 108 inches. Theirs were 120 inches.
Yeah. And those were $20 per rental per tablecloth. Lefties only list like a 5-foot table, and then the 6-foot table, and the 6-foot table was $20. So at the 5-foot table, I don't know what the actual length of the skirting is, the tablecloth is, but that was $12.50. So if we have a wedding customer booking at the Iron Trail Motors Event Center, they do not want square tablecloths on round tables. The only other option they would have then is to go rent those linens. There's one other location in Duluth, and then Lefty's on this side of Grand Rapids, on the Hibbing side of Grand Rapids is the other place that they can rent them. And the rental fees, they would have to actually go and pick them up. Then I believe our city staff would go and put those linens on the tables, but then they would have to be removed by the wedding party and brought back to Lefty's for laundering. And is that the correct process?
Yes.
Okay. And Airmark cannot service our rounds. So what Brian and Jim had researched was that we can stay local with laundering them at our local cleaners, at Affordable Cleaners on the end of Chestnut Street. But I went down to visit with the owner, Dave, and they don't have equipment. They're actually doing it all by hand. So in order to have this service, just so the general public can understand why we need to increase these rates, they would either have to go to Lefty's in Grand Rapids or go to source them in Duluth. They would have to go and pick them up and drop them off, and they would be at a higher cost than our suggested price increase at $10 per round tablecloth. So I just wanted to give the full gamut of what we researched, how far we went in the research, and that if we want to be able to offer those round linens, which the city actually owns, the upcharge isn't necessarily setting up or taking down. That's all included within the ballroom rental. However, it is the actual laundering. We are using someone local. There is no one else that can actually launder those. So that cost increase is why Brian is coming forward and asking us to, we had requested that we be able to offer those, and that is the price that it would cost the city. Thank you, Mayor.
We do have a little bit more than the price that it costs the city, because we'll have to replace the linen over time. We have the hourly costs for our staff. So all those things have been accounted into the recommendation of $10 an hour, or $10 a tablecloth.
Thank you, Brian. Councillor Johnson. I'm sorry, Councillor Beyondich, then Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. And the reason I wanted this put on this agenda is because we need to get those prices changed on the website and in print, but still honor the price that was given to the individual that is using the table linens. So yes, we did some research on it, and we do have to up the rates on those as quickly as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beyondich. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you. One of the things I'd like to have considered as we move forward is setting a policy that when the city rents or uses a service, that there's an automatic escalator that if they increase their, like we did with the utility or with the cable company for the apartments, that way staff can take current. So my concern is we set it at 10, and in 2 months, there's a softener shortage and their costs go up by $2 and we have to come back. So that's the other thing I'd like to consider is, and maybe it needs to be a policy. I don't know if it's just for the new building or what it is, but I'd like staff to look at how do we allow them the flexibility to increase directly based on what we're being charged, so we don't have to do this regularly. And I don't know if it's probably a percentage based on what Brian had said about the other stuff involved. So, and I don't want to make is there a motion on the floor, Pam?
No motion.
I will move to approve the increase as presented today.
A motion by Councillor Johnson to approve the request to increase the cost of the tablecloths to $10. Is there support? Support by Councillor Beyondich. Further discussion? I do. I'm just going to give you one example of several examples, and I don't know if you got cell phone calls or not, or because I'm a mayor, they're call me, but you get a lot of calls that I don't get. But I'm going to give you one example of a customer that wanted to rent the Ontario Memorial Event Center for their wedding. It was so cost prohibitive for them when they looked at, so my question is, if this $10 increase as far as an amenity, when you put your wedding packages together, Brian, as an example, is it all inclusive, or do you pay X amount of dollars and then if you want tablecloths, you have this, if you want an extra cake table, you want that? So what she's telling me is that the cost was so high that she could not afford to hold a wedding there. And when she talked about the tablecloths and how expensive they were, and how they talked about, the aprons and all those kind of things, and when she added it all up, it was extremely cost prohibitive. So she booking the Elks Club for this purpose, and it's 1/15 of the cost, although, of course, the venues aren't even close to being comparison to the professional you have. So my concern is if we're raising these costs of these, is there a way that it can be absorbed through the package deal as opposed to an individual table? So if you want 20 tablecloths, you pay $10. If you want 50 tablecloths, you pay, $500, in addition to that. So in addition to the wedding costs, in addition to the other amenities, now you're asking for tablecloths. The difference between the other venues is that, example is the Elks, so they give you an option. You can have the tablecloths, and then we provide them, we buy them, and we provide them for them, which apparently is a lot less than $10, whatever, for whatever reason, I don't know, because maybe because they're square or whatever. But then they have the option of not having cloth. They could put plastic tablecloths, or they can bring their own linens in, and so that's what they do in order to offset the cost, to reduce its significant cost, but still have a decorator come in, and it can be as elegant as they want it to be at a lot lower cost than it is for the Ontario Memorial Event Center. And I get it that we have to charge what we need to do because we have a premium venue that we're operating. So I guess that's a long way around of saying, as part of this tablecloth increase, is that part of that's absorbed in the wedding package, or is that all separated out?
We do not have specific packages. If you look in your packet under our equipment rentals, there are some little packages that you have, but we are set up as an à la carte shopping. The room comes with the room, tables and chairs. If you don't want tablecloths, you do not have to get tablecloths. We have set our prices so that we are not losing money when we are providing these services.
But so the people can't bring in their own tablecloths?
They can bring in their own tablecloths if they so choose to. But if they ask us, I want the cost for the room, with 20 tables, with the tablecloths, I want the dance floor, I want the audiovisual stuff, then we give them an itemized quote for what they want, and they can choose to add or drop things from their request.
And maybe this particular individual misunderstood or about being able to bring in their own, things, not food, but I mean their own. They rent the room and they can bring whatever they want to decorate it up. So they were under the impression we had to use all the amenities that the ITRA Mortgage Event Center offers. So thank you very much for that.
And we do not do decorating.
Right, correct. But you allow it.
Oh, absolutely. We've worked with multiple decorators for several different events.
So, and I want to reach out to the person who's likely watching this committee, the whole meeting, and indicate that the information that you received is not quite accurate. So please, once again, reconsider going to the Iron Term Mortgage Event Center and giving Jim Hunt a call. So thank you for that. Councillor Paulson, and back over to Councillor Beyondich. Councillor Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. And I just wanted to kind of address that that type of scenario that you just described. So yes, people can bring in whatever type of tablecloth, and they aren't being charged. So they're being charged to rent the ballroom, and then if they want the dance floor, or they want this, or they want that, then they add those in. People can, I'm just even online looking, you can purchase round tablecloths. They're about $6.90. The lowest I'm finding is $6.99 per tablecloth. If they actually wanted to purchase them, they could purchase them lower. But in the research that we've done, even if you hire a decorator, that decorator still has to have a place to launder and clean those round tablecloths, and they're going to pay at least what the city's being offered to pay or being charged to pay from our dry cleaner, and there really isn't another dry cleaner even close. So it kind of puts us all in a little bit of a pickle. But there are those options, and then if they do want the square tablecloths on the round tables, they certainly can do those, and those are provided by Airmark, brought to us, dropped off, and then also picked up and laundered for a very low amount of money. But it's the round tablecloths that I don't know if it's after COVID that are giving us trouble. Or also that there's really not, if they don't have the ability to launder them, then all we have to rely on is, a dry cleaner to do that for us. But people aren't being charged for it. They can say, okay, I'm going to bring in my own linens or what have you, and then that isn't part of it. But Brian, will the city staff still set up what is involved in the setup process? You set those linens out when you're setting tables and chairs?
As we are setting tables and chairs, we're setting the linens. Now, that would be something that our event manager would work out with the customer as far as when they would be getting the linens to us and things like that. If it would be feasible for us to get their personal linens set up.
Regardless, though, we're still providing that as a service of our setup. Okay, so they're really not losing out on anything other than trying to figure out the best possible affordable way to get round tablecloths. And we did really do our homework on this. I think we did. So I'm comfortable going forward. And then, I think that's, Councillor Johnson, that may be another discussion that we should have. But, like candy bar prices or not the other prices for the concessions, I think we should have that conversation. But going forward, I'm totally fine moving forward on the $10 per tablecloth fee.
So thank you. So the $10 clarification is
for a premium table skirting.
Yeah. So I know this gets a little off track, but when you come to the linens, so they want the linens, they bring their own linens, and you put the linens on the table. Do you charge to put the linens on the table they provide?
If you are bringing your own linens, no, but more than likely, if you're bringing your own linens, you have your own decorator that's going to put on the linens.
Okay, just wanted that clarified. Thank you very much, Brian. Councilor Beyondich, I know you have a schedule to keep.
Thank you. And I would encourage our fellow council that part of our job here is to educate the public. I was reached out and was told that we have a very good pricing structure as other facilities. When you go there, you put your own tablecloths on, you put your chair covers on. That's on you. We are providing that service for the public. And I also want to just tell you another little incident. I had somebody stop in to see me that they had checked out the price of renting for a convention at our event center, and they got the price for a 3-day convention. Well, in a long story, they came back and said, well, we didn't book there because we got it cheaper elsewhere. And I said, can I ask where you got it? And they told me, but it was for 1 day. And I said, you're not comparing apples to apples. Did you go back to our center and ask for a 1-day price? No. Well, part of our job is to educate them and tell them, you should go back and ask, what would you have gotten it for 1 day? Because chances are they would have been here. So I think that lies on us as a council when people come forward with this, and same with the linens, that you know, the one party that did booked off the price from the website. So we do have to stick with that price. And that was why I wanted to get this on here quickly, so we could get that changed and not have that problem. But people are able to come in and decorate and put their own table linens, chair covers, and save the cost on that. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Beyondich. So it has been moved and supported to add that second tier for the tablecloths with that price that was previously discussed. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Councilor Johnson.
I would like to move to direct staff to work on a policy about automatically escalating when our costs go up and bring it forward to a future meeting.
Okay, motion by Councilor Johnson. You have that motion written. Is there support for that motion? Support by Councilor Freely. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, Maya. Councilor Beyondich, for the long, laborious process here. So see you at the next meeting. Okay, Britt.
Thank you. Item number 7, request for handicap parking sign at 911 13th Street North and removal of hearing impaired sign.
Okay, thank you.
I will move removal of the hearing impaired sign.
Okay, as part of the street and alley on item number 7, the first part of it is to request that the removal of the hearing impaired sign be affected by our city staff, moved by Councilor Johnson. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Councilor Paulson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Now, the other part of that is the request for the handicap parking sign at that same address, 911 13th Street North.
So moved.
Move to approve the handicap parking sign at that address. Is there support?
Support for discussion.
Support by Councilor Johnson. First discussion. Further discussion? Councilor Johnson, and I believe Councilor Baraboo as well. Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I supported it for discussion, but I won't support it moving forward because that accessible sign does not guarantee anybody the right for those folks to park there. Anybody with an accessibility placard would be able to park there. And again, it would only be on the day of the week or the day of the week that it would be. And I know we've had several of these requests since I've been sitting here, and we do consistently deny them for that reason, that it doesn't guarantee parking for those folks. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. If I remember correctly, 13th Street is the one that runs along the golf course Is that the same one, the 900 block? No, that's the 1000 block. Yeah, 13th Street runs along the golf course side where our former city administrator, or sorry,
City attorney.
Our city attorney lives in, and there's only parking on one side of that street that's allowed. There's no parking allowed on the other side of the street. It's just the one of the few streets in town where you can only park on one side because there's no parking on the other side by the golf course road. So there's one side of parking there, so.
Mayor, if I may.
Please do.
We also usually deny the middle of the block request because there is no way for us to get a pedestrian ramp.
Right.
So it's technically not a legal handicap parking spot.
Right.
So it's very difficult to put them right in the middle of the block.
Understandably so. Thank you very much, Britt. Councillor Paulson. And then over to Councillor Berber.
I just was kind of going back to what we have done in the past, and because we have that calendar parking, we have denied them in the past. I understand what you're saying, because there's only one way they can park on that street. But if we can't do it legally, then we really can't do it. So I would probably not support that right now. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that when we post children at play signs or report, be careful, hearing impaired, those are kind of safety issues that we can put about anywhere on the street. There's no requirement by the state with respect to that, but the handicap significant is. I was just pointing out the fact that this is only parking on one side, so there's no back and forth. But at the same time, it's not a legal handicap as indicated by our city administrator. Councillor Baraboo.
And if we did put one there, the individual would have to be at their own expense. If they want to get rid of the curb there, they'd have to put in, with permission from the city, their own ramp area there. But Councillor Johnson is right. Anybody can park in those handicap spots as long as they got a sticker. So I'd be probably against putting one up there too. I didn't see a letter on this with a request. Was there a letter?
Yes, there was.
I must have missed it.
We have a motion on the handicap one? Okay, there's a motion and a second for discussion to approve the handicap parking as requested at 911 13th Street North. Is there any further discussion?
I want to
Hearing it, Councillor Baraboo.
I just want to ask John a question. John, what's your philosophy on handicap parkings in the residential areas? We have to have them like on our main streets and other places that are required, in parking lots and stuff.
Councilman, a lot of that's dictated by the building code as far as what's required. As far as parking in residential streets, that's a city issue on what's been based on previous practice, and I understand the recommendation from the city administrator is that we stick to what's been the past practice, but I haven't been here long enough to know, how we've really done that in the past, if that answers your question.
Yeah, most of it has been, I would guess 90% has been denials for those handicap spots because you just can't control them.
That's been my understanding too, Councilor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baraboo. So it has been moved and supported to approve. Is there any further discussion?
Has everybody, sorry.
Councillor Freely.
Has everybody read the letter? All right, thank you.
It's been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing, seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed?
No.
Roll call, please. Pam?
That letter.
Friedlieb?
Aye.
Paulson?
No.
Beyondich is absent. Johnson?
No.
Baranzelli? Cuffey?
Aye.
Baraboo?
No.
Motion fails 3-3. Thank you. Next item.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is item number 9, designate city council members for the interview committees for both the event coordinator and the sales and marketing position at the Iron Trail Motors Event Center.
And I'd like to start by saying that I have made this request in the past, and I'm going to ask it once again. I'd like to designate council members to sit in on this. I would prefer to have at least one member of the Personnel Committee on the interview panel as well. And so how many members can we have on this interview committee as far as answering the questions under the hiring policy?
Up to 3.
It doesn't matter.
Up to 3?
Up to 3, so thank you. So I'm looking for some council action, some suggestions, requests, motions, whatever, to designate. So as we're moving forward, I guess I would ask for anybody who's interested in serving on this committee, and then we'll move forward to a motion moving forward. So first we'll go to Councilor Johnson, who has the light on first, and then go around the room. Councilor Johnson.
I would volunteer for the sales and marketing coordinator as the tentative schedule, if it's a schedule that I can accommodate.
Okay, Councilor Johnson volunteers. Anyone else?
I would volunteer for both.
Councilor Freely volunteers. Anyone else? Okay, then if there's nobody else, would you like to volunteer?
I would volunteer for the, I mean, do we need to volunteer for both, or do you want it kind of split? I don't know how you'd prefer that. I'd be fine with working on the event coordinator side of that. You'd like to be on both, so you're part of the personnel.
Well, for me, what I'd like, if I may suggest, I would like the same committee members to sit on both, because they kind of, these two committees work hand in hand with one, or these two positions work hand in hand with one another. And I think to have a consistent measure of what you believe is the best candidate would be appropriate in my view. So I would like to see if you would be willing to do both. Okay, and Councilor Johnson as well?
The only tentative appointment I could not make based on the calendar Britt sent out would be the 13th.
We can change that too.
Then yes, I could sit on both.
Okay, very good, thank you. You could, and as well, and would you be willing to do so, Councilor Paulson? So I would look for an motion from the floor to appoint Councilor Johnson, Councilor Freely, and Councilor Paulson as the designated council members to assist in the interview of as part of the interview committee to the event coordinator and the sales marketing position at the Ironton Motors Event Center. Councilor Bearable.
I just have one question, Britt. Now, there's 2 interviews, the first one, the second one, the final. I always go to the second one because that's open.
The second one's the full council.
Because I don't like to go to the first one because it takes way too long, and
It does
I
take a
think
long
the
time.
committee can do a good job on.
Yeah, the second is the full council.
Okay, that's all I needed to know, so I'm not going to volunteer.
Then are you willing to make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we appoint the 3 members of the council to the interview process.
Okay, motion by Councilor Bearable to appoint Councilor Freely, Councilor Paulson, and Councilor Johnson to the interview committee for both the event coordinator and the sales marketing position at the Ironton Motors Event Center. Is there support, Councilor Barnzelli? Is there support? Yes. Support by Councilor Barnzelli. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Thanks for volunteering. Councilor Freely.
Quick question. So it was 17 and 22. Have we pared that down to what we're going to be interviewing?
That's for you guys to decide.
Pardon?
So I need you 3 on the committees now to go look at the applications.
Oh, okay. All right.
Pare them down.
Right.
There's, like I said, 22 for one and 17 for the others, quite a few applications. And some, of course, you'll see are not qualified whatsoever, and some are really qualified, so.
So is the first one just a paring down, and then you go automatically to the second one?
Yeah, like you mentioned, it has to be a second one. So the first one's the long day, where we go through a whole bunch of them, and then we bring our recommendation to the second one.
But we get notice on the second one?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
It'll be a special meeting.
Oh, very good. Our City Finance Director / Human Resources Director, Sherry Erickson. Sherry?
I just wanted to exercise some caution. When you are reviewing those applicants, that's all confidential information. So don't be talking about it.
So not only in public, you can't talk it amongst yourselves, correct? So keep it close to the vest as we are all maintain our confidentiality. Thank you for that reminder, Sherry. Okay, let's move on.
Thank you. Item number 10 is approval for 2022 Police Week event at the Iron Trail Motors Event Center parking lot on May 12th, 2022 from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m.
Okay.
I'll move.
I'll support.
Moved by Counselor Paulson and supported by Counselor Bearable to approve the request for the Police Week to be held at the Ironton Memorial Event Center in the parking lot on May 12th, 2022 from 4 to 7 p.m. Is there further discussion? Did I get a second on that? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye, opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
Item number 11 is approved letter of support for the federal RAISE grant with MnDOT for transportation improvements related to the Rockridge School. And this is a grant that MnDOT is submitting for federal funds for that project. They're looking for letters of support from cities.
I will move a letter of support.
Moved by Counselor Johnson. Is there support? Support by Counselor Barnzelli. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Okay.
Motion
Okay.
carries. I'll reserve that comment so for later on a parallel matter. So thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is the discuss property offers for parcels in the Public Safety Development Area 101 and 109 8.5 Street South and 111 10th Street South.
Of course, this portion of the meeting may be closed pursuant to Minnesota Statute 13D.05, Subdivision 3, Paragraph C3. Do you think it's necessary for us to move to closed session in respect to this, Britt or John? Do you believe this should be go into closed session, or do you believe that this is something we can move in the public realm? Is there anything that we need to discuss privately?
Depending on the level of questions, I'm not sure how to answer that.
Okay. Well, we have done in both, and so Counselor Johnson.
I'll move that we go into closed session.
All right,
Just
Counselor Johnson moves
cover
to.
ourselves.
Yeah, Counselor Johnson moves that we go into closed session regarding item number 12 on the agenda. Is there support? Support by Counselor Barnzelli. Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We now move to closed session to discuss item 12 on the agenda, which is the discussion of property offered for parcel in the public safety area 101 and 109 8.5 Street South and 111 10th Street South in Virginia. Okay, we're in all closed session. In open session, so whenever everybody gets back, while we're waiting for Counselor Paulson and Counselor Johnson in return, we're in closed session. We are now back in open session to discuss property offers for parcels of the public safety development area of 101 and 109 8.5 Street South and 111 10th Street South in Virginia. And after significant discussion, we now have an open session. We're looking for council action regarding these three properties.
Do we need these in separate motions or just one? Separate?
No.
Okay.
Okay, you ready to go with them, Councilor Bearable?
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Give me those numbers again.
101, 8.5 Street South, 109, 8.5 Street South, 111, 10th Street South.
Okay. Make the first motion for the 101, that's 8th Street South?
8.5 Street South.
8.5 Street South.
A move by Councilor Bearable and supported by Councilor Johnson to approve the property offer of 101 8.5 Street South for purchase by the city in the public safety area. Is there support? I'm sorry, it has been moved and supported. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
The next one is 109 8.5 Street South. I'll make that motion.
A motion by Councilor Bearable and supported by Councilor Johnson to approve the purchase at 109.5 8th Street South. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Opposed, motion carries. And that last one?
I'll make the motion to authorize the purchase for 111 10th Street South.
A move by Councilor Bearable. Is there support? Support by Counselor Johnson. Is there any further discussion? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion carries. Anything else, Britt? Okay, I just want to let everybody know, if I may, it's not council business, that one of our canine officer is in the public, so his wife is suffering from a significant debilitating disease that requires very specialized treatment. There was a fundraiser at the the Vietnam Veteran Motorcycle Club put together at the VFW in West Duluth on Saturday. And on behalf of the council, I went and represented the council in that regard. And I want to thank the council for their support on this and for their generosity, as we as a council purchased a 55-inch color curved TV as a raffle prize for that event. So thank you for everybody for that moving forward. So that being said, is there any other items that have to come before the council today? Councilor Freely, Councilor John Sullivan.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to defer to Britt for a little bit for her to weigh in, but one thing that's been happening, especially to me, from the public, I'm getting all kinds of calls and emails from people asking, hey, can I back up a flat truck, and I'm just going to take one of those garages over there in the Public Safety Center. You guys aren't doing anything with it. Hey, can I just come in there and strip some copper and all that kind of stuff? No. The answer is no. And I keep getting requests from people to just come there and scavenge things. And this is similar to what occurred back when we were tearing down the miners, if you recall. Everybody said, geez, why are you tearing that stuff down? We'd just like to come in there and grab some seats and grab this and that. Well, there's a lot of liability that the city holds by people coming in and just picking things out. We just can't allow that to happen. And the requests keep coming in. So I thank you for allowing me to mention that. And if you council people could back me up, and if people ask you for these kind of things, please tell them that there's a reason. And I guess I'll defer that to Britt, because I'm afraid Kraus Anderson is our construction manager at risk, and I believe they have been asked as well if people can just have things. So, Britt?
Said it all exactly well. There's a liability factor to it, and then because it is actually city-owned property, we have to go through the surplus process if we were going to sell anything. We'd have to take bids and such, so they can't just take things.
Yeah, and whether this causes more attention or not, we want to make sure that we let the public know that, even though you might, some people might want to, in the dark of night, abscond with some of that property, let it be known that it is a crime of theft, and without permission, not allowed to use any of that property or take anything from that property, or even go on top of that property. It's a trespass issue. And I don't know if this is something we need to put in the newspaper that says, hey, just a reminder, everybody, this is, so that I leave it up to staff to make that determination. So, John?
That goes for the property owners who have sold to us as well. Once you've sold to us and you've turned over the keys, it is not your property anymore, and we're having a few issues with that as well. You just can't come back and start picking stuff that you say, geez, I forgot this, or I decided I want that. You sold it, we own it, that's done.
So before they sell it, they should remove everything they want.
Absolutely, and that's all been negotiated, and we're having a deposit, an escrow deposit that we're requiring from the sellers, so they don't leave us some gifts in the garages and all those kind of things, which has happened early on in the process. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you for that. Councilor Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. And I don't know if this rings true yet, since we haven't gone out for demo bids, but in the past, when we went out for the miners' demo bids, anything that was on the property was included in that contractor's demo bid, that they would be the recipient of anything that remained on that property. So that anything that disappears from the property offsets what the contractor bid on going forward, and that actually could also be a liability on the city's behalf. possibly not yet because we haven't gone out for bids, but that would be the case after the bids have gone out. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for that clarification, Councilor Paulson, because what happened at the football field should never happen any other time when we do this property. So I just throw that out there. So, nothing else to come before the committee of the whole meeting today. It's probably the longest one we have. We had a great discussion, got a lot accomplished. So thank you, everybody, for your time and talents and your efforts. Have a good day. We stand adjourned to our next council meeting. Thank you.